Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 18. 8 in Arcadia Ego Part 2, or Data and Picard's Excellent Adventure.
You wanted me to do you a favor.
Yes, sir. When you leave, I would be profoundly grateful if you terminated my consciousness.
You want to die?
Not exactly, sir. I want to live, however briefly, knowing that my life is finite. Mortality gives meaning to human life, Captain. Peace, love, friendship, these are precious because we know they cannot endure. Butterfly that lives forever is really not a butterfly at all.
Very well. I will do what you ask.
Thank you, sir.
Goodbye, Commander.
Goodbye, Captain.
Get a little bomb and put it in a football, blow it up and make them pay.
Did you write that song?
Yeah, I wrote that. But it's based on another song with a similar or the same melody.
That's pretty good.
Something about taking a little star, putting in your pocket, and eating shit and farting all day. I don't know. No. something like that.
That's some profound stuff.
I know.
Is it though?
Is it Cliffs of
Cliffs of
Borg? Cliffs of Borg.
Cliffs of Borg.
That was a pretty cool shot. That was a really awesome shot. I'm really into the. I've mentioned this before. The shots of like large things on planets. Yes. When you like look at a large thing and it's sitting on a planet, and then when you have someone walk up to it next to it, I'm just like, oh my god, that's like 10 city blocks or something crazy.
Yeah,
like
did
that.
it like land in water, or did it just create water when it landed?
No, I think it landed in some sea in the
but
edge.
the Borg cube is quite a large.
It is large
vessel.
It is
structure, whatever the fuck it is.
I hadn't thought about that. It's a good question.
I mean, because it's a lot bigger than like even the Enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, by itself, it's probably the size of the tallest skyscraper in the world, right? No, maybe not that tall, but it's what makes it big is that it's
taller.
It's wider. It's wider. And when you watch Narek running up the rock,
but it's exactly as wide as it is tall.
It's kilometers
because it's a cube
on the side.
Kilometers on the side.
Kilometers on the
like
side.
Boys on the side.
Yeah,
kilometers on the side.
Is that a phrase?
Boys on the Side. Isn't that a movie or a phrase or something?
Boys Don't Cry.
I believe it is a movie. It is a movie.
Boys Don't Cry is a movie. I kept rewinding.
Boys on the Side is a movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Isn't it about like football or something? No, I don't think so.
Drew Barrymore or something.
Okay.
I have never seen it, but
I don't think it's about football. But yeah, I kept rewinding that scene and watching and trying to picture Narek when you rock. I was like trying to place him like actually in the cube and imagine how big he would be in the cube. And so I was like, I bet each one of those sections was like the size of a warehouse or something, or a hangar, like a hangar or a warehouse or something crazy like that. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty impressive.
And it's it's another great opening to the show. I think they've done a pretty solid job of having a lot of interesting imagery right at the beginning. So well, anyway. I guess we're getting into it. First things first, getting right into it. So the name of the episode was Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2. Mm-hmm. I think I got that right.
You did.
Better than last week. I got notes. This week I have notes.
Notes.
Last week I did not. So what we're going to do today is we will discuss the finale episode. We're going to focus on that. And then next week, we are aiming to do a sort of a wrap-up episode where we talk about the whole season and our thoughts and positives, negatives, discussions that have been going out on the interwebs and all that. So that's something to look forward to next week. And all right, so we've already gotten started here. We've seen the cube. We've seen Narek sneaking over.
He snuck into the cube.
He snuck into the cube and had a weirdly touching scene with his sister.
Yeah. She seemed almost relatable there. I mean, she's still like her snarky self or whatever, but you could see some more honesty, yeah, like in her eyes. Like, he snuck in, right? And I mean, I know this is not something that should be harped upon too much, but it's just kind of
Harp away, boy.
It was just everything was localized to that one spot in the Borg cube.
Yeah, that's like they're all hanging out in that one little...
in that one spot. And of all the places Narek had to sneak through, he had to pick that spot to sneak
you can
through.
always argue. I mean, first of all, yeah. Of course,
I mean,
agree. It's for dramatic, whatever. You
Yeah.
could argue that, of course, 7 of 9 is going to be near the important bits of equipment that he needs to access to do whatever his
I
plan
imagine
is.
there's several important pieces of equipment that they can access, but at the same time, I guess it's drama, so it can serve two purposes. One of watching him sneak and do his thing, that narrative, but then also go by the part where Elnor and Seven have that conversation where she's like, well, I'm XB, I got nothing to live for, blah blah. He's like, but I'd miss you, sort of like, meaning like that was kind of a weird part. He's like, XB should all die because nobody cares about him, and he's like, but then he's like, I care about you. So I mean, I guess that was making a point. I was making a point,
and
I get it.
It goes back to that whole absolute candor thing that he talks about, which is sort of the because I was thinking the same thing, where it's like it's kind of a fucked up thing to say, but on the other hand, it's like, well, that's what he's thinking, and it's kind of cool that he says what he's thinking, and then Seven can respond, and then he can adjust himself accordingly. She helps him make the connection that he cares for her, so obviously other people could care for these people.
Yeah. So I thought, that was more of like a reflection of Elnor's character itself. I was cool with it. So I was all right with you guys. So that was all kind of like having in the same spot, and then
What do you think about the bit with Picard and the butterfly?
Oh yeah, that was good. Although right before that was that really cool shot of Elnor walking out of the Borg cube, and of Narek walking out, and then Elnor sort of silently like walking behind. That was cool.
Yeah, Elnor's pretty tight.
The Picard butterfly was great because it really harkened to Patrick Stewart's buddy Ian McKellen's talking to a moth on top of Orthanc in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it was similar. Picard was imprisoned. He talks to a butterfly / moth, and then it flies off.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't rescue him in this case.
But I was thinking, like, because he's all like, lucky you, and it's maybe because he can fly away.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a synth butterfly?
Yeah, that's a synth butterfly. There was a mention, I think, in the last episode where Alton Inigo Sung mentioned something about liking butterflies, and they didn't have any there, so he missed them.
That's right. Yeah.
So he made them. But I guess the main part of this scene is Soji is sort of coming in. She obviously feels bad. She wants to talk to Picard. And he gives her, the little talk about, don't fuck this up, basically.
Yeah.
But her argument, what's interesting about the scene is her argument just echoes what many oppressed people have argued against their, when they've gained an upper hand on their oppressors and are like, no, you guys fucked us up. And the only way you'll stop fucking us up is if we fuck you up. And Picard is arguing against that. And it's kind of neat because you can appreciate both points. Her logic is not crazy. You know, it's not some crazy insane. I'm an insane robot. It makes sense. It's just there's the moral discussion to be had.
I'm sorry. I'm like totally trying to picture what scene we're at right now. This is at the very beginning. This is before. Is this before?
It's in the cold open.
This is before.
This is before the credits.
Before Narek and Narissa like meet up for that final time, basically.
Oh yeah. Because this is the scene where Picard is in his room. Soji comes in, and they're having this discussion. And so the crux of the discussion is this idea of the the logic behind having to do something horrible for the sake of saving your people, kind of.
Wait, wasn't that last episode? Last episode she had a discussion with Picard about this was right after she had set Narek free. She had a discussion with Picard about where it sort of led me to believe that she was she was trying to like see if she should, kill a bunch of people
Yeah.
or not, but really it was like, should I have actually killed Narek instead of not killing Narek, instead of setting him free? So
Yeah, this is a second discussion. It's sort of reiterating that point, except now this is after the android has been killed and all this other stuff has gone down that has convinced her to go on the pro beacon side.
So last episode, what was her name? Sutra, right? Sutra was trying to get people all riled up, saying like, they already killed, one of our sisters or whatever.
Yeah.
That was referring to her Saga or
Yes.
whatever, Saga, who like got killed by a knife to the eye, which that was when Soong was being kind of creepy. He was all like, "Oh, my beautiful golden eye."
Yeah, that was
He's
weird.
like, her and your beautiful golden eye. It was really weird. But so what? I guess they weren't counting Jana either. I mean, that would be the second one to die. I guess that's neither here nor there. But yeah, spike to the eye. I don't know. It seems like what, and I guess it fucked them up bad enough that it like messed up their some kind of optical receptors.
It was, I will say it was an odd thing. I thought this last episode and this episode, it sort of almost accentuates that fact that you see this corpse of an android there with just something poking out the eyeball. And you got to think that if they're anything in similar construction, maybe they're not. But compared to Data, I mean, he took a lot more than that.
Yeah, he got beat the hell up.
Yeah. So, I guess the technobabble works and it looks dramatic.
Sutra's really the destroyer. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Totally.
Sutra's really the destroyer, and her sister was the one that died.
Yeah.
So yeah,
if you're buying into the whole concept,
Right.
of the,
As far as the Romulan prophecy goes, like it's more like those.
Yep.
Those two are the twins.
But they keep calling Soji. They keep insisting that Soji is.
Well,
the Romulans do.
Well, yeah.
And Patrick Stewart
they're
kind
just
of
misreading the prophecy. They're misreading their own stupid prophecy.
Yeah, well, the thing about the prophecy though is once again it kind of like it's a matter of like, I farted and it's like, well, no, you didn't fart. I just gained a smell,
Right.
like it's like
Yeah, right.
either way, it's like you didn't lose a fart. I gained a smell. And the other one's like, no, you didn't gain a smell. I lost a fart. You're reading it wrong. It's just two sides of the same coin.
Well, it's multiple sides. I think what they've done a good job of this whole season is setting up this idea that you can interpret these things a million different ways. Because you could interpret it as it's Soji and Daj. As far as we know by now, Daj is dead. Soji's alive, and she's the one actually working on the beacon and stuff in the end, right? So you could argue that is the pair. You could argue it's Jana and Sutra because of the same exact scenario. Jana's already dead. Sutra, blah blah blah. I don't remember any of them beating on something with skins made of baby flesh.
Yeah, that
or
was
whatever.
that was a weird little story right there.
And by the way, you could also take the more scientific approach and say there's no such thing as prophecies, so that all it is a story that people are then applying, like they're twisting reality to fit the narrative of the story as they see fit. Because why would it? It's not that unusual to have a story about sisters and somebody dies and somebody doesn't.
Yeah, it was Ganmadan or whatever.
Ganmadan.
And it's like these ancient precursors to the Zadvash saw the admonition and they got all crazy because they lined it up with this older mythology thing, and they combined like what they saw with that.
Yeah.
And like this is what I'm saying, this is probably what happened, right? And over time things changed, but like they already had this myth about like some shit going down, and the ones that saw the admonition, like they were like, this is like that shit that's going down, like, and then those were the ones that went insane, and the other ones,
See, that's what I was wondering though.
it made sense to them through their mythological framework.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
So they projected it onto that.
I was wondering though which way it went, because I was wondering if the admonition was the cause of that story.
That could also be the root of that.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, because
Because we don't know when those people were there. If that was before they went to Vulcan, or who knows?
But Narek does say when in their little campfire scene, right? And I think it's okay to skip ahead because there's a few things in between. But the little campfire scene where they're talking about this story. First of all, he's a good storyteller. He's all like animated and stuff and making acting
He's like,
shit
"Did you
out.
know
Chikalagu.
But
you must know about this and this.
The foreteller. It was Sebnatan, the foreteller, plays a drum made from the skin of children.
Right.
And then she
plays it so hard she has a heart attack.
she strikes it with the chain of skulls. She strikes it
Skulls
with
of children.
this chain of skulls so hard and so long that her heart burst from the effort. but like, why? You know, what did that have?
Right,
It's kind of interesting because on the one hand, it's kind of neat that they're painting a picture of a fuller sort of set of like knowledge and lore about what's going on, but at the same time,
a
it's
crazy
like
bunch of mythology.
it's
lore,
kind of
yeah.
like it kind of like left me hanging there. You know, it's what is that? Doesn't really tie into what. And that's fine.
It gives you some color. It colors some things in, but you're still not getting.
I think
the stuff.
They will feast and nurse their brats in blood and pick their teeth with bones.
I like that part because he all picked his he like mimed picking his teeth in some theatrical way.
Yeah.
From a narrative perspective, I think the purpose is to accentuate the purpose of the almost the exaggerated nature of this particular myth he's telling is intended to exaggerate the fact, to highlight the fact that this is a myth, and what he's describing clearly goes beyond this, because earlier all we've heard is like the destroyer. You know, okay, we through our own cultural lens can put whatever we want on that, but now it's mapped out a little bit clearer to us, and our perspective is like, that sounds silly or cool or crazy, but it's and the other thing is he mentions that it could go. That the stories, he almost implies that the stories might go even beyond the Zat Vash, because he talks about like the stories might come from even before our ancestors came to Vulcan.
Before the schism of the Vulcan.
And here's the thing that's interesting about that in terms of a potential deep cut Easter. I don't know if it counts as an Easter egg or not, but it references, there's a TOS episode called The Return of Tomorrow. And the deal in that episode is they get a distress signal, and the Enterprise goes and visits this planet, and they find these two spheres that have these minds in them. And long story short, basically the minds want to inhabit human bodies. They want to transfer their minds from the spheres to the human bodies temporarily so that they can build android bodies to inhabit, because they want to be real again. And they talk about being this ancient civilization that evolved into this massive like level of intelligence or whatever, but then were destroyed by a cataclysm, because basically it's not described in detail, but they had some big giant war or something, and these were the two survivors. And what was interesting about that is they say that they kept referring to Kirk and Spock and everybody as their children, and they were like, Kirk is like, why are you calling us that? And they're like, we, hundreds of thousands of years ago, we traveled the galaxy like you, and we spread our seed around the galaxy. So you may well have evolved from our seed. And the humans are like, blah, blah, blah. But Vulcan is like, oh, but it would explain a lot about some inconsistencies in Vulcan prehistory. So it's that already introduced the idea that maybe Vulcans and Romulans split off. Mm-hmm. Right, Romulans left presumably and went to Romulus, but there's this idea that maybe the pre-Vulcan and Romulan people like actually came from somewhere else.
So, if we're talking about different interpretations of the same sort of prophecy, I guess it's a matter of what is the important part to take away from the story in this situation. The important part to take
something's coming to get you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Something's coming to get you. And
the purpose of the tale.
The purpose of the admonition, and now the question, and which I took it as, like I said before, I took it as the tale was, I wasn't sure if it was derived from the admonition. And the admonition was simply like, this story was passed around, everyone knows this story, but it's like a legend and a myth, and they embellish it to make it sound like, it's too crazy to be true, but it actually is based around some truth, but only the Zhat Vash know that truth, right? And so he said, this is not prophecy, it's history, and it's going to happen again, basically. So as far as the story goes, and I guess I'm still harping on this point, that I guess it doesn't matter, but I just, Soji, I'm still caught in like last episode when Soji told Jurati, she straight up said, it's like, the Romulans and you all with your weak, pathetic minds or whatever she said, you misinterpreted this. You misinterpreted. You guys are wrong. We are right. And maybe the Romulans didn't get the subtleties that Soji felt she got. Who knows? Soji could have been full of shit too. Maybe she thought she was right, but really there was no right or wrong. In the end, the result is the same, whether you interpret it on the Romulan side or
the
synth side. It's that, and it was established, I mean, unless there's some kind of craziness that comes up next season, it was established that these were come get you monsters. Well, they weren't looking for any kind of trickery or redemption, which would would have been kind of neat. But I guess the point of this episode wasn't so much about those. The point of this episode was other things, which I was okay with.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that too. Although I will say I think somewhat dissatisfied that there wasn't a lot of clarity into exactly this, because as you know, last week I talked about how my thinking was what would make sense from a Star Trek perspective is that it turns out to be neither of those things. That it's like some other thing that Sutra also misinterpreted it, and that it turns out that everyone's interpreting these things from their own perspective and with their own motivations and biases, and as a result, they don't know the actual truth. That would have been, and then so if whatever aliens did come out or didn't, whatever, it would have been something different. They did look like super scary robot monster worms.
They were you could tell they were bad because they were all clanking and they were snake-like and they had sharp teeth. Those are like the telltale bad guys.
But we still don't know.
And the crack opened up in the sky, like he said in the story.
We still don't know if those worms would have eaten the human, or like, you know, the biological people, the organic people, or and help the synths, or would they have also eaten the synths? Was it a trick? Like, we just don't. There wasn't enough explanation about that. I'm fine with it because I agree with you, Dan. What they really have done was they set up some expectations and they kind of took it in a different direction.
Yeah,
I was still very pleased with the outline, but I wish there was a little bit more tying up of that loose end.
Yeah, it was a little bit more straightforward in the sense of what they meant, insofar as what they didn't tell us. And right, it's a loose end, so in one sense it's not straightforward, but it is straightforward in the sense that these guys weren't meant to be anything other than something to kind of stop, you know, something coming from the sky to come get you. And like you said, we don't know if they were going to do, if the snake robots were going to get the people or the synths or everyone. I think at this point in the story, just like with Narek and Narissa's parents, they didn't reveal anything more, so I have nothing else but to assume that those were their biological parents and they're having an incestuous relationship.
Yes.
I've been waiting for a time for clarification. When are we going to find out what's actually going on with those parents? And they never said. So based upon what the story gave us, I have to go with that knowledge.
And you're right about this too, where we unless they change something in the second season or something, or revisit it, we just have to sort of assume that Sutra was right. Sutra saw the exact correct thing, and exactly what she said was going to happen is what happened.
And the Romulans were right too, that something was going to get them, even though Sutra may have been more right, and but had more clarity.
And that's a lot of people have discussed that this is the sort of a paradox, self-fulfilling prophecy thing of you create this thing to warn the synths, but the thing itself ends up causing the threat to the synths in the first place, and it's this whole circular whatever. Again, it's a little bit of a sloppy is not a fair term, whatever, foggy point. Whatever point is there, it's not jumping out of me, right?
Yeah.
I look forward to people writing in and explaining where I've got that wrong, but I'm still not entirely clear on if there was a sort of a metaphorical message in this part or not.
Yeah, and like you said, I kind of wish there was something more metaphorical that stood out to me, but also like you said, is like, yeah, they took it in a different direction. But yeah, like also back to Jesse, what you were saying about Seb Cheneb, and that goes along with those same lines. I mean, there's twin sisters, twin demons, who come at the end of time to open the way and unleash the Chkalagoose, Sebnatan, the foreteller.
And Elnor is all like, it's just a story.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we have to understand that Elnor is right in the end, because as events play out, it's like none of the mythology actually pans out.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
absolutely.
in some senses, the mythology can be applied to some of the events that happened, except for the end of it.
Yeah.
Like the story did not end the way they said, at least not yet. And maybe you could argue like, oh, well, that's because there's actually a second
It hasn't
thing.
really happened
Yeah.
yet.
So yeah, and so that goes with about Seb Cheneb. Who is the Seb Cheneb? It's, I guess the story, it's kind of like not apparent which one it is, but the whole time they were pushing for Soji being Seb Cheneb, but the story was pushed. Everyone was pushing Soji, you're Seb Cheneb. And like you were saying, Jesse, earlier, and Picard even said at the end, he was like, "You are Seb Cheneb, is that who you want to be?" Or whatever whatever he said. It's like, you're going to be that thing that nobody wanted you to be and you didn't want to be. Bilbo. And so
Bilbo Baggins.
and so, but the actual person who was bringing doom was fucking Sutra, right? But at the end, but like it saying, like, a lot of these things are kind of left sort of applied to how you want it. It's just kind of funny how the narrative seemed to push that Soji was Seb Cheneb when really it was like, so I guess the thing is like Soji was the one bringing all the shit, but in the end somehow, Sutra was the one bringing trying to bring down all the shit. Somehow it did end up in Soji's hands though, somehow, because she was the one using that kind of like augmented reality Minecraft game to build the tower or whatever.
Sort of complicated Jenga.
Yeah. So yeah, which was like some kind of awesome. I guess it was like that's the future of replicators, right? You can it's like on the fly dynamic, sort of on the fly replicators. They talk about. Have you ever heard of how they talk about now? It's like our replicators now are 3D printers. You know, we can replicate food by taking protein gum and 3D printing it, and so. Maybe it's not.
That's like this is a hoverboard. It's like that's not a fucking.
Right. It's not. So is that the future? Is that all?
Segway without a handle on.
Is that all the replicator is though? Is it's just 3D printing some molecules or some shit?
Well, and they the kind of an inside joke is that in some of the replicators on this show, like I think on the Mars station in the first episode, and I think in some other ones, they're actually using 3D printers that they've kind of just like painted a little, and dressed up to look like a futuristic replicator, and that's sort of a clever little inside joke.
Fucking hoverboards were not hoverboards. You're right. That didn't even look like a hoverboard. And then when you like
talking about Back to the Future.
Well,
whatever product they've come out with now, and they're calling them.
I got you.
We're not talking about the ones that they made in the 90s that they got banned because the parents complained. You remember that one?
Yeah.
We had hoverboards. We had Back to the Future 2 straight up hoverboard technology, anti-gravity.
Check it out on Snopes.
We had anti-grav technology.
Check Snopes, you'll see.
But the parents complained. Check Snopes. And they just buried the whole technology altogether.
All right, can we talk real quick about General? Now we know she's General O.
So okay,
her copy and paste fleet.
Yeah, copy and paste fleet.
Another disappointment in the episode. Now again, I really like this episode. I'm gonna make that clear. I thought it was the two parts. It was cool resolution to the story, great build up, amazing emotional stuff that we're going to get to soon.
Yeah,
the data stuff. Yeah. Really, some great.
Second time I watched it started like actually hitting me a little more. The second time.
Oh yeah, I was like in tears. And stuff. But I am somewhat surprised that both the Federation and the Romulan fleets were so homogeneous.
Yeah, they were,
and it was disappointing.
Riker even pointed out, he was like, "I've got the top, awesomest, coolest ship ever, and I got a million more of them behind me."
And the Romulans were like, "We got a bunch of these guys." The Romulans had 3 types of ships at least.
Yeah, I mean, at least Picard and Jurati had an excuse because they're a MacGuffin that apparently had 2 functions. It fixed some. It unfused some device. It unfused a device that allowed him to fix their ship, but it also made a million. It made a super Picard maneuver to make a million ships. So those usually MacGuffins only have like
we should
one.
Do something and call it the Picard maneuver. It's
Yeah.
like, wait, there is a Picard maneuver.
Usually they only have one sort of like thing they do, those devices, and usually you kind of know the deal. You're like, okay, they got to just put A into slot B. How are they going to put A into slot B? And then the magic happens. In this, they didn't have to do that. They were just kind of like, okay, well, now it's going to fix this, and now it's going to fix that. And Patrick, you were right before, though, about talking about that device. You were like, that's going to like fix some
What did
shit.
she call? Dr. Aggie called it something goofy, like this kind of replicator with a something.
Oh my God!
She gave it like a super scientific name.
Jubilees.
Yeah, I actually have that
quantum Frigglemot.
I knew you would have.
Yeah, they call this guy Mr. Notes.
Mr. Notes.
Johnny Notes.
Johnny Notes.
Johnny Notes. Hey, Johnny Notes in the house. Looking up words.
He's got copious notes.
Writing down words. Looking up notes.
Is the Picard maneuver really a thing? It probably. I don't know.
It's from when he was on the Stargazer.
And
it is on a Stargazer. Like, but I'm saying
she said Enterprise, and he corrected her. And he said it was the Stargazer, and it was a long time ago.
Well, was it? Was it actually? Was it actually in an episode of anything?
Yeah, because long story short, it's actually very early. It might even be season 1 episode. So season 2, season 1 when Picard is basically on the Stargazer again, and he's under like the mind control of a Ferengi.
Right. Yeah, the Ferengis find the Stargazer.
It's a whole complicated thing, and they're like fighting Picard, and he's about to do the Picard maneuver. It's one of those things that is both a super clever idea and also completely doesn't make any sense within the context of Star Trek, because the way the Picard maneuver works is it takes advantage of like space and time and time dilation and stuff, and it's where you warp really quickly to a different position, so you momentarily look like you're in two places at once because the light from your original position is reaching the other ship at the same time, and then you fire on them from like the new position or whatever.
Right.
And that sounds like a great idea in actual reality, but in sort of the Star Trek universe, it kind of doesn't make any sense. It's like, all right, why wouldn't anybody just do that constantly?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's like super hard to press the buttons fast enough.
Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop.
So yeah, it was the MacGuffin device. It was a wacky fundamental field replicator with a neurochromatic interface.
Yeah, that's what she said.
A neurochromatic interface.
Wacky field.
It was a wacky fundamental field replicator.
Okay, so I know that
Polysynephrine, polysynephrine, 20 cc's of polysynephrine. I looked that up on Google. Polysynephrine. Yeah, that's right. I looked that up on Google. There was like, I think literally one result, and it was about Star Trek. But like, it was like the fandom website. There was not even any other like Star Trek references.
It's funny when you're like, you're watching a show or you're reading a book and you're like, what is that word? And then you look it up on the internet and the references to that book.
Yeah, right. And there's nothing else. It's amazing that there was nothing else. But I wanted to go back to real quick the Commander O. I actually looked that up in the last episode. According to closed captioning and the voice I heard, Romulan officer in the last episode called her Commodore O.
Yes.
And this one it was, sorry, not Commander. He called her Commodore O. And in this episode, he called her General O.
Because Commodore doesn't make sense because that's her Starfleet rank.
But it was funny because it's like they did that on purpose because Riker actually pointed that out.
Yeah.
He was like Commodore or General
Maybe
or whatever
they filmed
you're going
it
on.
and they're like, we can't fix it.
Yeah,
we'll have Jonathan Frakes do what he always does and fix everything.
I directed a couple of these already. I know you were a Commodore, or sometimes you're a General.
He got that transfer pretty fast. Like he got that. Where'd that fleet come from?
He jumped on
They already had it.
He jumped on a Starfleet ship.
He was on the reserves.
Yeah, he probably like showed up and had like a pizza sauce driven down his front.
He was lucky that he was only making those like little European pizzas. If he'd been making like big size pizzas, he wouldn't have been able to jump back on the ship so fast.
He wouldn't go through some like
just
exercise.
just give me the transporter.
Just need to take a nap. So
one thing about the Romulan ship design, just a side note, is we saw them a little closer up this week. I thought they look cool. You know, they're a little bit, same style, sort of an evolution of the style from TNG, but kind of doing their own thing and sort of evoking more the old sort of Klingon bird of prey. And where that makes a weird kind of sense is that like the Klingon bird of prey was introduced in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. And in the original script, my understanding is that originally, Commander Krug, the Klingon guy who goes on the rogue mission to the Genesis planet, he originally was supposed to steal a Romulan bird of prey, because that's what they were called in the original series, in order to accomplish his mission. But eventually that got written out and he just flies there with his own ship. And but the name stuck, and then that became the convention. And then the sort of, I don't remember if it was ever confirmed on screen, but I know the sort of like secret canon or background canon is that Klingons at one point were sort of teaming up with the Romulans to fight the growing Federation, and that's when they exchanged some technology, and that's when Klingons got a hold of the cloaking device, because they didn't have that before. That was a Romulan thing to start. And then, then eventually they started hating each other again. But that was kind of interesting. And then the other thing that's sort of interesting about that is that the search for Spock, in a sort of a meta sense, like in Nemesis, when Data was killed in Nemesis, they set it up almost identically to the search for Spock, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Search of Spock situation, where Data downloads his memories into B4 before he goes on his suicide mission to, save the day. And that was meant to evoke Spock downloading his memories into McCoy, and then in the search for Spock, eventually having those memories put back into his new body, right? And there is, you could see how this whole season is kind of taking that idea from Nemesis, which was setting up this idea that Data could totally come back. Data could be resurrected. Mm-hmm. but they're subverting that because they're not doing that. In fact, they're doing it with Picard. They're doing the opposite with Data, as we are soon going to discuss. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting, sort of loose connection between some different things there.
I liked they used this technique that they used in the Stardust City Rag episode where they do some sneakery, and as they're doing it, it flashes back to when they're planning it. And I think that's pretty cool. I don't know if maybe they've done this in other TV shows, and I just don't watch that many TV shows. But I kind of like that bit.
It's kind of, I think it's an Ocean's 11 kind of thing. I think I don't know if that's the first place you see it, but that's certainly a prominent example.
It's neat when they do it.
Yeah, I think it works pretty well. I don't know about the actual plan. The plan.
The plan itself isn't. Yeah,
the plan is like it's kind of a
cinematic
TV show plan.
techniques are cool.
I got nothing against the plan. It's just it's not a particularly sophisticated plan.
You're talking about the plan to put the bomb in the football.
Yeah, and
put the bomb in the football and
that was like a
boom.
football.
Oh, sorry, it was a football.
It was just such a funny thing. Here we have a prisoner, and I'm just I got my soccer ball that I carry around with me when I'm fighting when I've crash landed on a planet with a bunch of a variety of enemies. And there's other enemies coming to vaporize us all, even though we're fighting with each other. But
gotta fit in some time.
Yeah, and
you play? You play soccer? Cool.
I know it's relying a little bit on the fact that the synths, the androids, are meant to be somewhat naive. As intelligent and capable as they are somewhat naive. I did really like the guards, the gate guards. Their weird little sword staff things were straight those were some serious TOS style craziness. Just some sort of I have some crystal sword.
Yeah, even their clothes were kind of excessive, just the way they were.
Yeah,
it was so they
had funny makeup. They were some of them were painted up funny, and
there's clearly different iterations,
glittery and weirdness,
different iterations. In that village.
So and then Narek pulled out his super 540 spin kick.
Yeah, that guy.
But Elnor could still kick his ass though, because Narek was like, no. When Elnor said that weird shit, that I shouldn't talk about other people's languages weird. He said Feldor Stam Tourette or something. And then he goes. Then Narek goes. I very much choose to live.
Yeah.
So he didn't want to fuck with Elnor, but then he pulled out that super kick, and when they did the thing, and then Elnor was kicking some ass, and then the bomb went, and then it just was all for naught. And Soji just but what happened to Narek after that?
Yeah, no,
that's a question.
Total loose thread, completely disappeared after that. Not even after that fight. Halfway through that fight, we just don't see him anymore.
Yeah, he's just gone.
It does seem I don't know if they had to trim down this episode or whatever. There just seemed to be a few loose threads. And one of them being the Narek situation. The other one being Sutra, which comes up, this is around the same time in the episode, what we're talking about, where Alton Inigo Sung, AI Sung, who's not lore, as it turns out, and still works out. This actually works out better. But he just, he turns off Sutra, and that's the last we hear of her. I mean...
Yeah, he just presses the button and she's
I didn't know there was an Alton Sung.
Yeah, no, nobody did. That's why I was that's why myself and a lot of others were assuming, especially because he was kind of an asshole, although we had Dan and I had this discussion last week that the problem is is he lore because he's an asshole? But wait, all Sungs are assholes in some way or another.
So because the original Sung that we know the most, who created Data, he was known to be kind of an asshole, and he kept getting kind of second chances too. So I guess that's just kind of the deal in that.
And on Enterprise, they have the ancestor of all of them, Arik Sung, I believe, who's a geneticist, and
was he an asshole?
Yeah, he's an asshole because his whole deal is that he thought it was wrong that they had stopped all the genetic, the Khan genetic engineering, super strong, super intelligent people that happened in the 90s in the Star Trek, continuity that created Khan and all his people. So Arik was trying to get back into that genetic engineering stuff, and so there's a whole bit on Enterprise. With that.
He also played by Brent Spiner?
He was.
So that's great.
Yeah, it's good.
That's great.
So at first, then I was kind of well, they really sort of forgive Sung pretty quickly after Picard's like, I want to save all of you. And then Soong's like, no, we got to arrest you. And then, later on, it's just kind of like, oh, thanks, man. Thanks for saving me. And Soong's like, yeah, no problem, dude. I guess everything's okay now. But then I was like, Star Trek has a history of kind of sort of forgiving certain characters, I guess. So it's not something that's...
And then he's not cool because Dr. Aggie killed Bruce Maddox, but then he's like, okay, I guess you're going to go along with us, so you're cool. You're like their mother. Like,
Well, I think he was
that
also... From his perspective, he just thought she could help him, too. So I think he was like happy to be nice to her if she thought she could help him because Maddox was dead. So
right, that's true.
he probably didn't give a shit about Maddox, honestly. I mean, I'm sure he did. I don't want to be an asshole, but
And it helps to have
not that much of a
another
shit.
organic around in case the synths want to kill off an organic. He's like, well, they'll kill off her before they kill off me, probably.
So some of the threads they kind of cut off was, one, the synths that were going to come and like the sort of celestial synths or whatever you want to call them, they came over through this. It's like, what are these things that are coming? There's coming. I guess they only played them up for one episode, but they kind of cut that line off, right? The whole line where Agnes Girardi was, like Jesse, you said when they were talking about, I would die for my children. And then it's like, oh, wow, what's that? What's this setting up? Is this setting up she's going to do some I thought she was going to die.
Right.
First, originally I thought...
She's like, I'm not their mother.
She was just like, wait a second, I'm not their mother.
But here's the cool thing.
Is that something that's, though, like, that
what that did was, I thought that was a good little subtle line, because last episode she was able to lie to Sutra, and Sutra was like, I can tell if you're lying, I'm going to scan your biosigns.
Right.
And she looks at her face and she says, would you ever harm your children or whatever? And she says, absolutely. Or would you die for your children, is what she says. And she says, absolutely. And she can say that without lying because she does not consider them.
Right.
And she's all like, I'm a pretty decent secret agent.
Yeah.
I know,
and I see that, but I thought they were going to take it to the direction of, like, she was going to die for the synths, but not to help them, but to like make things better. But yeah, it still kept with what she said. It was kind of, but it was just kind of, I don't know. But then there was also, to this, the second moment of, the weird goobly machine that created all the Picard maneuvers. That was kind of like, that whole scene was kind of like a quick shutdown.
Wacky fieldonomic
pseudo-namacryotron, jubal dobble. I don't know.
The Necronomicon.
Yeah, so that was kind of
Mega MacGuffin.
that. So the way they sort of cut off the Romulan attack was fun, I guess, but it was kind of like,
it was a delay.
It was a
series of delays. Basically.
It was a series. Yeah, it was a series of delays.
The flowers were a delay.
The flowers. It's an interesting concept, making those flowers, but those things really don't have any armor at all.
I think
I don't know what they were made for specifically.
They're made to like disable ships or something.
But they got burned up.
But when you think about it, there is a logic to it. If you take a machine gun to a tree, they did that on Mythbusters, trying to cut down a tree with a machine gun. That shit takes forever.
Yeah.
But taking a machine gun to a metal
it's like a bullet
post
sponge.
or something, so there's a logic behind the value of it, but obviously limited in utility, especially when you only have a few of them and you are attracting a very menacing force of a lot of identical ships.
But once again, it was okay though, because the real sort of story was like the story, I guess, of moving on and letting go. And
I think the other thing here is, I know a lot of people have really been harping on, including us to a certain degree, been harping on this idea that Girardi like murdered a person.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying not to be obsessed over that.
I don't think that concern or that criticism is invalid. But when you just really think of it, she was, again, given an order by a high-level Starfleet officer, given brain information that says that all this horrible apocalyptic shit's going to happen.
It's hard to beat that brain information.
She knew Maddox, and Maddox was not like some super awesome person. They could have done a better job of explaining that, in this series, because from our perspective, he seemed like a kind of a pitiable person. But if you know him better, he's not an evil guy, but he's not necessarily, he's more like a Soong type, in that,
Wait, which guy?
Maddox.
Oh,
right?
Maddox. Yeah.
Because when you first meet him, he's kind of a
he wants to rip Data apart and replicate him, and he thinks it's perfectly fine because he just doesn't see Data as a person. And obviously he changes his mind over time about that, but that doesn't mean that original, that same, the source of that kind of cold attitude isn't still there. But the fact is from Girardi's position, everything she was doing made sense to protect the universe, right? That was her belief, and it's hard to argue against that. You could argue that you shouldn't be killing people regardless, and that might be the overarching message here. But you can't blame them.
Well, and by that rationale, and they actually did this a little bit by making Soji momentarily not bad, but they made Soji sort of like walk the line,
following the exact same logic.
So
my people are going to be destroyed if I don't do this.
But that also allowed Narek to sort of be not forgiven, but they're able to work. First of all, they're able to work with him because they have a common enemy.
Because he believes in that shit.
But Soji has given us evidence to believe that maybe Narek was onto something with that stuff.
Yes.
Maybe his approach might have been kind of dickish or whatever, or misguided, you could say. But having Soji walk the fence like that or whatever allows us to sort of like reconcile with the fact that Narek's been being kind of a dick this whole time, and now it's like, well, he's really just trying to prevent some bad shit from happening. Now, Narissa wasn't given that forgiveness though. Narissa, because I guess you could say what, because she killed Hugh, or like why Narissa wasn't forgiven like Narek was. Now, at
she was
first
more aggressive.
She was more aggressive, and she was kind of more of an asshole, and she seemed to have less remorse about what was going on. But Narek was just straight really manipulative, though.
Yeah. And why should Narissa, from her perspective, have remorse? Ultimately, I do think that what we do see harped on a lot in this episode, I think it's more on the nose in this episode, whereas in past episodes, I'm now retroactively realizing it's also come up a lot, which is this idea of choice. The idea of not being able to force people to, you can't really control people. You can influence them, but ultimately you have to give them the opportunity to make the decisions they're going to make. And that's what Picard does, with Soji, of course. But all these people are making decisions based off of the beliefs that they have. So there are certain justifications, but obviously there's also a tension there because they can't all be right necessarily. And it is hard to, I don't have an answer for like whether the synths were right. If they were really believing that they would be destroyed, the Romulans really believed that they would be destroyed. They all seem to have an argument based on the evidence that's been provided.
And it's like some of it's easy to dismiss because it's like the Romulans, they're just basing it on some kind of magical mythological shit, and so it's like, well, they're the bad guys because they're not, it's just some kind of it's ancient hate. Ancient hate is never cool. So.
And Romulans already have a history too of being kind of assholes.
Yeah.
Well, as far as like what the synths believed, I mean, Soong also, when he approached Sutra right before she died, he was like, you appealed to their emotions by letting Narek go.
Mm-hmm.
You appealed to their emotions. So that was an admission right there. It's like they have emotions, and I mean, I guess that's understand. I mean, I guess that's obvious by the fact that they, like play soccer and have motivations and things like that. Although Data had motivations, but and Data played violin or whatever. But they appear to have emotions. But it seems like by saying that, it goes beyond just the surface level of you look happy, you look sad, you look this.
Yeah.
Like they actually react in a sort of probably some kind of statistical way of like, oh well, if these emotions are triggered this much, then they do that. Then they do that. So
you don't need emotions to play the violin.
Ultimately, it's also it's the self-preservation.
I mean,
right?
I'm sure you know this.
Baroque music, you don't need emotions.
Whether you call it an emotion or not, it's the concept of self-preservation, and that's like a pretty deep level, hardcore. Like that makes sense for these types of people to have programmed.
And that's an interesting emotion because people always talk about fear as an emotion, but fear is a self-defense mechanism.
Fear is an incompetent teacher.
Yes, yeah, I like that line.
line.
Yeah, that was a good line.
And
it's
true.
It's
true. A great fucking message.
Yeah, it is. I was really it's thinking about like what's going on with like markets and things like that. And it's such a stupid asinine thing to apply it to, but I was like thinking about that. No,
I think it's an absolute. Honestly, I think it's a great thing to apply to. I was listening to a podcast with a scientist who was talking. He studies risk, right? And he was talking about how the problem is, and it's true of so many human emotions and human sort of intrinsic human things, that we have evolutionary traits that were at one point in time adaptive, but some of them have become maladaptive. And one of them is that we have not, been able to adjust our fear response
Right.
to fit the modern context. So we're still afraid of people who look different than us. We're afraid of things in the dark. We're afraid of things that we're not familiar with. When that's kind of ludicrous, it made sense when we were wandering around and the rustle in the bushes might have been something dangerous. But now the things we should be fearing, we're not. We're not fearing overeating and too much sugar and pollution because they don't trigger it.
Yeah, they don't trigger that sort of visceral kind of like
we're
creative reaction.
still really afraid of the unknown and you know, and the mysterious and
I mean,
stuff we don't understand.
I know that I'm silly for doing this, but like being out in the like people we know that go out in the middle of the woods at pitch dark.
Yeah, that's
you know?
me.
Yeah. I can't like I am terrified of that.
Oh,
and I think there's going to be a monster, and I know there's not a
Absolutely.
monster.
Oh,
I know
absolutely.
there's not a monster, but there's like some kind of Ghostbuster terror dog that's around the corner.
Here's the
gonna,
fucked up
like,
thing,
fucking
Dan.
Eat me, take my soul or whatever.
Here's the fucked up thing, Dan. I don't know if this makes me cool or less cool, but I am terrified when I go out there. It is both an amazing and wonderful and fun and happy experience, but there are moments where it's just like, what the I'm in the middle of nowhere, especially when you come across a person, and that's the most upsetting thing is you come across a person, a fellow human being
That's
out
what
in
you
the
should be
wilderness,
afraid of.
and that's the thing is I'm like, what the fuck is this person gonna kill me? And it's like they're
Exactly.
being super nice and pleasant, and that makes me more. I'm like, oh no, they're being nice to me.
Have a beneficial
They're
day.
definitely gonna. Yeah, fuck that guy.
Well,
That was a specific hiker, and he has to have been a murderer.
I've heard it from I heard it from two different places that's saying like people who are addicted to gambling, they like to lose or whatever. I'm sure nobody likes to lose money, but in a way that sort of like feeling, it's like a jolt. It's feeling this adrenaline of like losing money. Of course, nobody likes to lose, but in a weird way, it pushes some sort of like weird response to want to do more.
Oh, there are people who they actually react better. They positively when shit goes wrong because there's some kind of feeling that it externalizes the responsibility away from them. It's like, yeah, my life is shit because look at this horrible shit. Look at this horrible economy. Look at this whatever. That can actually help them as opposed to everything being really nice and then you're still not feeling good and then you're just like, well, then it's just me. I'm a terrible person.
Yeah, because I can understand the idea of doubling down when you're losing because you want to like pretend it never happened, but it goes different than that. Like you were saying, like it goes something else that goes on there. Did I ever tell you when I was a kid, I was sitting in my room, I was like 7 years old, and I was sticking my finger down my throat. Not because I wanted to vomit, but because I wanted to tickle my tonsils and play with my uvula.
Whoa, dude.
Yeah, and I did that, and I was like, whoa, this is fucked up. I don't like this.
I was way too afraid to have done it.
And like I kept doing it, and I kept doing it.
It's a fascinating form of self-exploration.
Yeah, it was.
Really is.
And then I eventually vomited all over myself. And I was just covered in puke.
And thusly a new kink was formed.
That's impressive.
It was that was a crossroads right there. That was a fork in the road because I could have turned that into a kink, but it turned out I never did it ever. I never wanted to do it ever again.
Yeah.
Why don't you give it a try?
You did it. You're like,
I'm afraid
okay.
of that.
You're
I'm
like-
afraid that at this point it'll become like a super kink.
You're like,
All right,
that's what happens.
I think we
You
should
do
put
this?
together a special episode of the podcast that's going to be like a COVID, like raising money for like doctors to get masks and shit like that, and it'll just be a countdown to Dan fiddling around with his tonsils and then vomiting all over himself.
Yeah.
We'll do a live YouTube stream.
Yeah.
It'll be
Oh, God, that would be
fantastic.
We've got to have video.
That'd
Yeah,
be really.
we'll
rough.
have to-
That'd be really rough.
But we'll have to
listen
meet like a certain level of donation. It'll have to be like $15, maybe $20.
$20 whole.
If you want to
Wow.
see this guy hurl, you got to give us some money.
That would be so difficult to listen to. I think because they've said that like hearing people puke is like one of those noises nobody likes.
No, it's bad.
We should probably. I was saying we should probably get back to the episode. I
Getting
guess.
back to the episode.
How about planetary sterilization pattern number 5?
Oh yeah, she kept talking about sterilizing.
I like that.
implying there are like a
That's
number
like,
of other.
yeah, it's like, do they have 10? Do they have 20? Like,
Well, they are still Romulans. They are still kind of assholes, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they have to sterilize planets.
One comment I did have was when they were, when the whole fight was going down, like right before all this, Narek is the one who's, Soji's all building her Tetris thing, her Jenga thing, and Narek was all like, Soji, no. And I was like, maybe he's not the guy who you have trying to convince Soji. Maybe one of these other people who she knows already, like Rio's, give it a try. How about you, Raffi?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you? Why is it the guy she hates?
Yeah, right.
Elnor
because
is usually
most-
pretty convincing. Like,
Yeah, and you know, absolute candor.
He
Yeah.
tells the fucking truth.
She's gonna have her fucking eye on Narek. Yeah, like I don't,
Yeah, eyeball, like Girardi plucking that eyeball out.
Yeah, that was great.
I really thought I
Eye captain.
eyeball.
I am
Eye. Oh, eye as an eye.
I am I, Jaw.
I.
I am my jaw.
It was really
you
cool
and you understand?
that they just had a close up
I
of
and I
Girardi's
do.
face as she's plucking the eyeball, and you can kind of guess what she might be doing, and obviously it's confirmed later. But
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was-
know.
I liked how they-
just this long take on her face, and she's all like,
Yeah. So that was cool. Now the scene when she's like flattering
It's cool
him,
noises.
she's like flattering Soong with the she's obviously flattering him, right? With the crypto kung fu. She's like, you know so much about cryptography, and now
She knows how to manipulate men very well.
yeah.
she does. Now there's sort of a,
old scientist.
Old guys, yeah.
there's a mixed sort of situation going
It
on
ain't hard.
in this because at first I thought that she encrypted it herself and told him, hey, you're good at like decrypting stuff. Why don't you do this? He messing and totally fooled him. And then she was like, okay, my plan all along was to encrypt some stuff and make him do that and then search the eyeball. But then I was like, wait, after he decrypted the shit, that was when he saw the image of Sutra killing, what was it?
Sutra killed is it Saga?
Saga.
Or was Saga the one who
Yeah, she caused too much damage to her optical processors and it corrupted the data stream. So, that's why Soong couldn't put her memory into a V module as a memento for Arcana.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's so.
Bunch of fucking words.
I'm really glad that you write all this stuff down.
You know, it's these are little gems you have to remember about the writing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so he discovered that, meaning, well, she probably didn't create it. She probably actually came across some legitimate cryptography. So my question is,
Cryptozoology.
my question is,
Searching for cryptids in the mountains.
at what point did she decide to pull the eyeball out? Was she just going along?
No, I think she knew she needed an eyeball. That was a convenient eyeball.
She's a
She-
decent secret agent.
Yeah, but
She
like,
distracted him by just saying, "Could you do this instead of me?"
so
basically.
you think she probably could have decrypted the crypto?
Yeah, I'm sure she could have. She just didn't get to it.
She's
She-
at
and
she's at that Okinawa Institute.
So she probably, yeah, that's right.
Daystrom.
So she probably
Yeah,
came
Daystrom
across a bunch of crypto and she was decrypting it and she was probably like, you know what? This one I'm going to say is too tough.
This will take him a few minutes.
This one will take him a few minutes. Yeah, that's probably what happened because like, yeah, you know.
because she's a sneaky young woman.
But he came.
as the kids are often wont to say.
Yeah. So she was working on neural lace for the golem. They did keep referring it to a golem.
Golem, yeah.
Golem.
yeah.
Golem.
Which is a Jewish, it shows a similar thing shows up in other cultures as well. But
It's like a Frankenstein kind of construct.
the golem is usually made out of clay or mud and infused with the soul.
Like Prometheus.
Yeah, Prometheus is a similar myth, and
So-
there's other similar myths.
So I thought it was kind of, I mean, it's an apt comparison, but it was kind of like sort of like a grab in the dark. It works as a comparison, but how did they grab that comparison? How often do you compare things to golems? You know, like how often is that used? When do you look at an inanimate thing on the table and say that's a golem?
If it's designed to absorb,
Androscience or
if I think it makes perfect sense in this sense.
I
which
agree it makes
and
sense,
we
yeah.
we discussed this last week. Was it meant as sort of a dig, or was it a term of art? I think we have to lean to the fact that it was a term of art in android synth science, because a golem quite literally is an inanimate object that is intended to receive a soul. In other words, to be instilled with a soul.
Okay, yeah.
In the mythology, it can often be that you often make them for revenge. For example, you build a golem to commit revenge. So
That's
you're,
usually what it is.
you're severing a part of your soul to put into it, and that's the part of the tale is that it's not worth it, because even though it will get your revenge, to get that revenge cuts off a piece of your soul, right?
It's usually more of a justice sort of revenge, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's intended to be. So it's a righteous justice, but there's still a cost.
It's still, yeah.
It will accomplish it, but there will be a cost associated with making that decision.
And Soong, AI Soong, Antoine Soong, or what was his name?
Alton
Alton
Inigo
He had a
Soon.
Inigo
He had a-
Montoya.
he had a-
AI,
he had a
artificial intelligence,
a lame first name, a ridiculous middle name.
and a proud last name.
He said earlier on to Girardi, he goes in reference to like the work they were doing. He said this is a remarkable act of self-sacrifice on your part. Now that goes along with what you were saying about Golem involving some kind of self-sacrifice. But what was her self-sacrifice? By rejecting all of humanity and like
Yes, he at that stage he was thinking she's going to put his brain in that body. She's going to get killed when all the synth.
Was her brain gonna go? I thought she was just
his
gonna
brain?
work.
No, his brain.
Okay,
Alton wanted to put his brain in that body, but Maddox wasn't there, and Maddox was the only guy who had even a clue on how to do that.
Right. Yeah. So I got that part. I didn't realize. I didn't.
And by the way, that's nothing new because there was that episode of The Next Generation where that old scientist dude puts his brain into Data's body, and he's an asshole about it. And so he takes over Data for a while,
That's right.
and then wanders around, and then eventually,
It's gonna be about that time for me to watch TNG from the start again.
Yes, sir.
it's worth it.
I haven't done it. Last time I did it was like 2014 or something. But so that was a self-sacrifice. Is she gave up like everything just to?
That's the scenario, yeah.
But she seemed
obviously that's not what's actually happening.
Yeah.
She's not in fact doing that.
Yeah.
She's working against him.
That was right after Rios accused Raffi of hitting the Horgle again.
Yeah.
I missed that part.
It was the Horgle.
Yeah.
Is that something different than snake leaf?
No, I think that's the thing that you vape the snake leaf out of.
Oh, that's the Horgle.
I
That
believe
makes
so.
that
Horgle.
sounds
it's like
good
hitting
to me.
the pipe.
And then hitting the
That's
hitting the Horgle.
that's a funny sort of name for like it could be like a slang term for like like the battery that you.
yeah,
Vape
apparently
or something.
is.
And
And then
nuclear power.
snakehead and what Narek is a snake head.
What
Snake-
Narek is
snake flower,
Narek
snakehead.
is a sexy little hobbit,
But he drives a snake.
and Eleanor is a sexy little elf. They're both Romulans, but
Whoa.
like when Narek shows up and he's throwing rocks at the
They got
La Sirena,
skills.
he just looks like he looks very hobbity there because he's getting
Yeah.
all like haggard.
Yeah, when he kind of puts his
like, I'm
arms
throwing
out,
rocks at you.
he's like puts his arms out. I forget what he says exactly, but he's like basically just like, well, this is happening. I'm
to
here
save
blah,
the
blah, blah."
world.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's like, I'm just throwing rocks at you.
Yeah, but he had 12 wide dispersion molecular solvent grenade canisters.
Yeah.
But he was just throwing rocks at first. So that was the time. That's when he turned good, and because Soji turning kind of malevolent was like the way of justifying his good turn.
But
once-
you wondered if he was up to something because like that chick all set him free all like seductively and mysteriously and is like, like, hey, do you want to be free?
what, his
like,
sister?
Like the
Sutra.
Sutra.
Sutra, right?
Because so you wonder if he's like actually up to like she's sending him to do something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought so. It just
there's an inconsistency there because
Yeah.
it does seem that clearly she let him go, and her goal was he killed her and ran off, so that's going to motivate them to build the a beacon. Okay, but you still let the guy go, and presumably the guy still hates you and is still going to use his efforts to kill you. Now it could have simply been.
man.
My presumption is it was simple arrogance on her part that there would be no way for him, so it was okay to let him live in order to fulfill the story of that. Although she could have also killed him and buried his body hidden someplace and told the same story. So
And nobody would have known.
I think it's a little bit kind of like I don't
Yeah.
know what's her plan. Was it a stupid plan or did the writers just kind of drop the ball there somewhere?
Yeah, I don't know.
Destroyer my ass.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that he was gonna do more stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't think the whole plan was just have him kill her and then let him go. But
He's
yeah,
like,
right.
Hey guys, let's team up now.
Yeah. The intermix reactor is fused. That's what he needed.
What was that?
Intermix.
I never heard of that shit.
The
before.
intermix, and the
What is that?
reason
that's come up before a lot on
when
Star
the
Trek.
reason he couldn't fix
man.
it is because the only way you fix a intermix reactor is by replacing it. But they couldn't replace it because that's what ran the replicator.
But why? So he
it
should
was
have
one
had
of
a
them
spare.
circle things.
You should have had a spare. And obviously,
You
if it's
think-
going to shut down all your power, you need a spare one of those because you're not going to have power to replicate it if it's broken.
He couldn't bring any of his dudes out because there was a power situation.
Yeah, it's another day. It's not a true dangling thread, but it was sort of.
Dangling participle.
I do miss the hollow.
Yeah.
My hollow friends.
because it would have been like
I'm hoping in season 2. we
Oh,
can
yeah,
discuss
Hollow
next
Friends,
week.
right.
Yeah, like
Hollow Friends are
I'd like to.
great.
We should discuss whether they should do like a Hollow Friends centric episode in season 2 or something.
That would be be a good idea.
Or like 3 or 4 of them.
I'd like to at least hear from the house hands, his two buds from home. I'd like to at least hear from
the
those.
producers of the show indicated that they would be back.
Yeah, it seems to
their
make
plans
sense.
anyway to have them back in the second season. So that we'll definitely want to hear more about them. But so the next thing though was the I guess we're at the
Wait, but real quick, when Jesse mentioned Narek being Zhat Vash, I thought all the Zhat Vash were women. Well, was that just an assumption
No,
I
that's
made?
Kawat Malat.
No. We did the Zhat Vash. All the ones we saw were
the
women.
Malat were too, but the ones that
Well, it seems to be also matriarchal.
Yeah, all the ones we saw were women, and he refers to him as himself as a Zhat Vash washout.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if he even saw the admonition. And
True.
And this is again.
But him being a washout would imply connote that, right?
No,
Or denote. It would denote that. That it was not all women because he was a washout, implying that he could have been one, but he didn't make it.
Would imply
Before
that.
I assumed they were all women.
It would imply. It would imply that
Because you see that scene.
But Elnor is also in there, so
yeah.
it could be that he's meant to mirror Elnor in that sense too.
Right, absolutely.
In the sense,
Yeah.
but they didn't have time or they didn't have the space in order to explain that more. Because I would have liked to learn a little bit more about that and that process. And who knows, maybe we have an opportunity to learn more about that next time if they decide to continue some of these elements of this particular story.
Last time on 15. You remember that show on Nickelodeon, 15? Sorry.
No.
It was a soap opera for kids.
Yeah, that's right.
I interrupted you because you were about to go into a next point to talk about Narek, and then I went somewhere else.
Well,
I'm
mainly
sorry.
to talk about not about Narek, but about Narissa fighting Seven of Nine.
Ah, yes.
Which was a cool scene.
Mm-hmm.
And the fight scene was cool and all that. Narissa is not, you don't see a body. And she has a habit of beaming away, like
in the world of Star Trek, if you don't see the body, they could just beam away.
Yeah. And not only that, but we've seen that. Like we've seen that repeatedly. They've shown us people being like thrown over a railing and beamed away, and we've seen her being surrounded by Borg and beaming away.
Exactly,
so
see Discovery too.
I'm kind of hopeful that she's not truly dead because that could be maybe they can follow up a little bit with 7 of 9 and help her feel less guilty about that shit.
It was an abbreviated fight, which I was okay with. The fight didn't need to be drawn out. I think it did what it needed to do, and I thought that was good. But at the same time, like, it would be nice if she survived and could come back and
I'm guessing
you could find out if those were really her parents.
The main purpose of this scene,
incest.
The main purpose of the scene, I think,
is
weird. It's a short scene. What, incest or just that?
The weird, it's the incest part, and the fact that I have to be. They never answered.
Weird?
They never answered if there was really, because it's just like
you don't have to know.
I know I don't have to, but then why did they do it? What was the point?
Because that's a popular category on Pornhub.
I mean, I hope. Oh man,
it is.
I know.
Which is
incest. Although often it's stepbrother or step aunt or whatever.
Yeah. Right. So
those people aren't related. They're just actors.
But no, the main point.
Don't mistake me for. I'm not complaining about that whole line because it's got me like, what's going on with that? Why are they doing this? But like, yeah, it's just kind of like
the main point of that scene was the line, "You're rather pretty, or would be if you weren't a disgusting half meat."
Yes,
right. Because
I love that line.
That's when she's able to like. She pulls some moves on 7 of 9 and it's like, is 7 of 9 distracted because she likes women?
I don't think that was it. Although that'd be funny if she was like, if that was like, if they like really like dialed things back like 30 years into the like dialed back 30 years of progress, and 7 of 9 was like, ooh.
Right.
I like that she called her a half meat.
Yeah, the half meat was good.
Yeah,
that was like a bag of meat. Bags of mostly water. That was
ugly bags of mostly water.
Half meat. That was a really creative line. I like that.
And
one.
it was sort of a Tolkien-esque. There's a lot of Tolkien influence here in terms of the style, some of the mythology.
Elnor.
Not only Elnor, I mean, that's the obvious thing, but even, where he's from and some of the usage of language, some of the story elements are kind of mythic in that sense. Not overly much. I think you can tell that a lot of the writers, and probably a lot of it's Michael Chabon, who, consciously or otherwise insert some things like that, because a half meat sounds kind of like man flesh. It's that kind of, it follows the same sort of texture.
Find the halfling! Find the halflings!
Yeah.
Bilbo Baggins!
I do, when Picard, gives this little speech about, open a channel to Soji, and it was like, I'm going to give you all something, my life.
Yeah, I wanted to go to that next too, because I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I guess
he was going to sacrifice himself. As a demonstration.
Yes, right. As a demonstration, he was going to sacrifice himself, but he didn't. But instead, he just got hit with his tumor all at once. Like, it was kind of weird that his tumor wasn't really doing much of anything to him. Then all of a sudden, he was going to die really soon.
Yeah, and I think that is they could have done a better job of having him deteriorate a little bit in sort of a slower rate. It was mostly in the last 2 episodes that they had him be all like, or say something confusing.
Because it got dire like real quick.
Yeah.
Well, and granted, it didn't get super dire until he took the medication that accelerated. They had that excuse there that they accelerated whatever was going on.
Right, but when he said, I'm going to give you my life, and as you said...
And Girardi's life, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Why don't you take liberties with it? Why don't you? Well, she already took someone else's, so...
Exactly.
But when he said that, though, that's... What did he mean when he said that? He said, I'm going to give my life, but how was he going to give his life?
Well, he was flying his ship out and he was going to shoot at a bunch of Romulans. At that point, he had no assumption that he was going to, that the Federation was going to arrive.
And that was before you saw a million Girattis all smiling in your face on the mirror, on the flatulence field generator.
Yeah.
A wacky field replicator.
I did I thought, okay, overall, I think key points about this, we can kind of call this chunk the epic space battle scene or whatever. And what's cool is it wasn't really an epic space battle. It was much cooler than that in the sense that they did not have to resort to that. It was a standoff. There was some initial fighting with the flowers and et cetera, but that was more of a skirmish, and it was more of a Star Trek diplomatic solution that ended.
And I liked that. In the sense that, for example, one of the problems I had with that Star Wars story, the one where the one that took place where before A New Hope, Rogue One. The problem is I remember at one point near the end they had a super space battle. It was like a combo space battle, land battle, and at some point during the space battle, I was just like, things are just flying around. Yeah. I don't know why.
It was cool, but
it was cool, but it didn't. It stopped feeling like
weight to it.
Yeah, there was no weight to it exactly, and it was fine, but it was like, it's like I don't really. You can do whatever you want and say whatever you want here. It's not really affecting me. So, right, I'm glad they didn't go that route and make some crazy shit they didn't need to. They got
they got a little in with the flowers. They got like a flavor of that. So that
it was really colorful. The flowers made it super colorful.
Yeah,
with all the lasers and stuff.
There's something about those people, they're sort of into flowers, because you see like 7 of 9 like drinking whatever that stuff is, and it looks like it's in some kind of like stem bottle or something.
Some kind of.
I think this is what passes for alcohol, and they're all like, ugh.
Yeah, I don't know where she got that booze from.
She just swiped it from some Android.
It's like the synths are making weird alcohol and getting down. Like
when the La Sirena is hit and sort of spinning out of control, they used some either TOS sounds or TOS influence, like sort of bleeps and bloops, like blah, 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 like it's hard to describe, and I should have just had a clip of it. But go back and watch the episode, and you'll hear like when the ship is all spinning around and Picard is trying to regain control of it right before the end bit.
And then when Riker arrived, they full on TNG musicified it. Like, it was full on.
You hear the music and you're like, oh, I guess the Starfleet's showing up.
Yeah. and it sucks. I mean, I do think it was, I don't know if it's budgetary or what, having all the ships look exactly the same. The ship was cool. It's just, you were having like 200 of the same
like,
ship.
when do they ever have like that?
The problem is you go back and you watch Deep Space Nine, and you see massive battles that have hundreds of ships, and there's lots of different types of ships. There's like Excelsior class, and they even throw some like Star Wars ships in there and shit. And it's much more dynamic. Now, no worries, it's a very, very minor nitpick, because overall the scene, like when Riker comes in, Riker is fucking sexy.
Yeah,
and
super sexy.
He's doing that Riker lean, like that sort of casual
he's
shit.
leaning right in there.
And I like when he refers to like, wanting to kick her treacherous Tal Shiar ass.
Yeah.
And partly that's awesome because A, that's kind of an awesome thing to say. And B, in olden days Star Trek, they would have said something like kick your Romulan ass or something,
right.
But that's racist.
Yeah, right.
And Riker's trying not to be racist. I don't know that he's not, but he's trying.
So she's Zhat Vash. Now, are all Zhat Vash are Tal Shiar, but not all all Tal Shiar are Zhat Vash.
Yeah, I believe so.
Does he know that
you can make
doesn't matter?
You can make one of them Venn diagrams.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair.
It's a
debate.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair argument to make that. On the other hand, it's a square circle thing. On the other hand, you could say that the Zatbosh, they would clearly have an advantage to being in the Tal Shiar, but they don't necessarily all have to be, because they could also be useful in other roles elsewhere, potentially although I guess they could also become Tal Shiar and then infiltrate those.
They could get
roles.
in that Kawat Malat.
Yeah, they could be joining the Kawat Malat and learning baklava.
They could learn about rosewater and sesame seeds.
So in those few days since he was on Nepenthe, Picard was on Nepenthe to when Riker Nepenthe, and then Riker arrived. They created a treaty with Huolian 4 and the Vite sector under protection of Starfleet, according to the terms of the Treaty of Algeron.
That's an old treaty.
Yeah, that's a treaty from the reference in the TOS series. That's
Algeron.
That's kind of set up the original relationship between the Federation and the Romulans.
So,
and
but the Vite sector, did they just kind of add that to the treaty at the last second? They must have just added it.
No. So
it just so happened to be, or I don't know what the treaty goes.
No. He was just, the original part is just the address, right? It's like, this is the address that we're discussing,
right?
And we're discussing it in relationship to the Treaty of Algeron.
I get, yeah.
And so all it's saying is, and this is, I think, I haven't seen anybody else mention this, but this is another example. Like we saw this a couple times before in this season, where you have creepy, evil bad guys who are willing to do almost anything to like save the world and the universe. From their perspective, yet they withdraw when confronted with like a legal problem.
Yeah, like when
Marissa and Hugh,
like she's like, I couldn't kill him until he expressed displeasure with us.
until he expressed that he was going to kill us.
Yeah,
I guess. So in this case, it's very subtle, but if you follow that conversation, right, she says, this is not Federation space, so they can't be claiming it because we're claiming it because we're here first. You guys just showed up.
Right.
Then Riker is like, and he plays the recording of Picard that was sent a few days ago to argue that Picard has already activated the legal clause. So, and she and the thing is General O's immediate response is like, oh well, shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, all right, you're right.
We're out of here.
Yeah, so I guess we don't really know much about what the Algeron.
They've discussed it before, but it's the whole relationship. Whatever. All you need to know is this is the legal document that governs the relationship.
I looked some stuff up, and they
stuff.
definitely talk about this in TNG.
Yeah,
it does go back to TOS. It's
At what point did all the hollow ships go away? I think it was when they actually hit Picard's.
Pretty much, I think, yeah.
They saw him spin away. I guess that's when it went away.
All right, so next up, I guess we move into the next phase. The last two chunks are Picard dies.
But not really.
Picard lives.
He dies for real.
So the Picard, when he dies, I thought, okay, on the one hand, he's obvious. I mean, the show's renewed for another season, so
gonna get Whoopi Goldberg next season.
Really?
You presume he's not gonna die.
Are you
so
serious?
That undercuts some of the morning tension here, like the morning scenes, because he's gonna come back in one form or another, right? But
I didn't know, like, maybe he could die and they could just keep going with this show.
Yeah, well, I'm sure some people thought that, but really realistically, it's like he's probably not
silly.
dead. This is not a Ned Stark situation, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I only make that comment because I think a lot of people will have felt that. But on the other hand, I thought that the morning scenes were really nicely written, really well done.
Yeah.
Like each of the characters reacted.
So
in a way that made sense for them.
Right. So Elnor basically found a mother figure in Raffi.
Yeah.
And that's perfect for Raffi because
She needed a son.
She needed a son. And he already has a father figure in Picard. And then it turns out, of course, that Raffi and Seven of Nine are implied. It's pretty.
They like each other.
They're into each other.
There's an initial attraction.
So there's an interesting relationship going on there because Elnor has another relationship with Seven of Nine as some kind of like,
friend, sister,
friend in arms, someone I go to battle.
Well,
with.
like you said, you have the two different types of warriors.
Yeah.
In your RPG crew.
Right, exactly. So you wouldn't quite call her a mentor, but at the same time, she does kind of have like a little step up. Plus now if her and Raffi are together, it's like a third kind of weird step-parent
I
situation.
mean, they're
or
building
something.
the pieces of a family here. Girardi and Rios have a thing going on that they
Most
like with
definitely.
each other.
Yeah.
But, okay. So as Picard is dying, of course, he has that, it's very touching and everything. And he says, Raffi, you were quite right.
Yeah.
She's like, about what?
Yeah, right.
And then he dies.
And you got to assume maybe he was talking about, the Romulan conspiracy and everything. Like all the things that she had been saying, he basically is giving her in his last words are supporting and agreeing that she was right the whole time, and that all the shit she's dealt with was wrong, that she was right and she deserved to be believed.
But he knew some shit was going on too. But I guess she had more of the conspiracy. She
was the more
stuff.
like I think again, if the show was 26 episodes and they were able to stretch this out over longer periods, I'm sure we would have gotten some more flavor. I think the assumption has to be Picard didn't want the synths banned. He clearly thought there was something going on, but it could have been a malfunction. It could have been sabotage. But like his main point was, we need to rescue the Romulans. That's a separate issue from the synths. And the synths, I've known good synths, so clearly, the idea being that Raffi was the one who was like, no, it's all tied together. It's all tied together. Everything's tied together.
Did you going back a little bit real quick? Did you think that Picard's sort of speech to Soji? I know this is going back a couple notches. Do you think it was really convincing? Like he said anything that was that convincing to Soji that would make her want to see the error in her ways and make Soong see the error, because Soong flipped as well.
Soong flipped once he saw the video, the security cam.
Oh yeah, I guess
footage.
you're right. He did flip on that.
And Picard, I do think he said at least one thing that from a just pure data, no pun intended, perspective, pure informational perspective, is he makes the point. He says, look, the Federation is here and they're not shooting at you. Yeah. We could be. Yeah. If we didn't, if we wanted to destroy you, we could destroy you now.
But there's also, but there's also when Soong said, Picard, you're not going to convince the rest of the fleet. But then again, he does have Riker and a whole shitload of ships behind him. So that implies that he has turned them to his side. So.
And we already saw that with his discussion with
Riker,
Clancy. Clancy already seemed convinced, previously, right?
Right. Yeah, she was definitely sold at that
She was
point.
like, something's going on here. This whatever you're, they don't know the whole tale, but
I'm going to cuss.
They know they know enough now that something's up.
Yeah, so after basically everything's saved, we do get 20 minutes of time afterwards dealing with Picard, which is cool. They gave a lot of time. Like in airtime, they gave that. So then the other conversation was between Seven and Rios.
Yeah, where Rios is we have a mirror here because Seven helps Rios understand that he shouldn't feel guilty for something that he could not have prevented. And that is a similar conversation to what we see in a moment with Data and Picard.
So,
right?
but Seven, she's lamenting the fact that she could have prevented, she's sad that she quote unquote or whatever thinks that she kills Narissa. And why does she really feel guilty about that? Going back to, before when Picard and Elnor were on the warp catapult thing where they got to Nepenthe from that warpy cannon, and Hugh and Elnor stayed behind, but they didn't know Elnor was there, and Elnor came behind and chopped up those two guards like several episodes ago. Now, originally what I was saying is that this is not, I'll try to make this brief, but this ship, there's no assumption that these are bad. There's benevolent people on this artifact, supposedly, right?
We're
People
getting murdered.
well, people trying to save ex-Borg, right? People trying to say ex-Borg. And who knows? Maybe these were guards that were trying to on the side of ex-Borg, but they still had a security issue. Who knows? But I think that after what happened afterwards sort of cements the fact that no, these guys were on the side of Narissa. These were probably bad guards. And so, but they didn't seem to struggle too much about those guards' death, even though those guards were established to be Narissa bad guy guards. Like, they didn't stress too much about that. But now Seven is reflecting on killing Narissa, who is, arguably,
Yeah, but Seven's
much
a
more.
different, she's a different person. You
Yeah.
know? Elnor's a trained warrior, and he's taught in that culture, and he's also killing Romulans. He seems to be almost excited about killing Romulans, which might have some relationship to how the Kawat Malat are treated by mainstream Romulans.
Then Picard was there. I guess you could just say Picard
got mad at him.
He got mad at him originally, but he didn't get mad at him there. He was just kind of didn't think about it there. He's like, thanks.
Well,
I guess he didn't have time or something.
Yeah, and a lot of that guard killing was happening afterwards too. A lot of his death toll was like after Picard had already left the Borg cube.
Yeah,
but regardless, it is a different philosophy. A lot of Seven of Nine's story is wrestling with regaining her humanity, and depending on how you look at it. Being able, still wanting to kill people, is that a Borg trait? Is that a human trait? Is it something that's shared between the two?
Yeah,
clearly something she's fighting with, and would be great to learn more about if she either continues on this show. Of course, there have been totally unsubstantiated rumors that there's going to be a spin-off show that focuses on Seven of Nine, or maybe Seven of Nine and Elnor. I don't know. That sounds like it could be total bullshit.
That would be really awesome.
It would be really awesome.
That would
though.
be cool. Yeah.
And that's the thing is it would be awesome. And we're in a day and age where Captain Pike is just fucking blows everyone's mind. So everyone's like just demands to have a Captain Pike show, and that looks like it's going to happen.
Hell yeah.
It just is manifested and because the studios are now in a position where they can respond a little bit more to fan desire because they want to make shows, and fans are like, well, I'd be into this show. Now, the other problem, of course, is there's a bunch of fans who are assholes, and if you don't give them exactly what they want, they get pissed.
Right.
And the problem is everyone wants a different thing.
Those are called Star Wars fans.
Yeah, I know, right? So you can't please any of them. So the focus shouldn't be on fan service. It should be on putting together a good story, which I think they've done here in Picard. I think they've done a good job of like, we're telling a story. It's not going to be perfect, and you might like some things, you might not like some, but this is the story we're telling. We're not going to constantly reconform the story to being like, what do we think fans will just think is great?
And like you were saying, we already have a 90s Star Trek show, and that's the Orville, So,
yeah,
like you can get
which is great.
You can get your fill from that,
And I love the Orville, and I love the vibe the Orville gets, but I also like that we have a different flavor of Star Trek, not only many different flavors coming up.
Well, because they lend themselves to TV shows. Star Trek has always lended itself to being a TV show, and if you are going to have a bunch of series, do you really need a bunch of series that's all the same fucking thing?
And that's what.
Although you could argue that the style of Picard is very similar to the style of Discovery in some ways.
In some ways, but in other ways, it's very different in terms of the. It's a little less frenetic. It's filmed in a more sort of a straightforward cinematic fashion. Different moods and things like that, different style of writing in some ways, storytelling, but you're right. I mean, it is a serialized show, and it does share a lot of, obviously, special effects and things like that. There's certain things that are going to be shared, but there's a cartoon coming out. There's the Section 31 show that's apparently still eventually going to go back into production. But there's these options, right? And that's cool. It's really cool to have options, even if they're not all 100% your cup of tea,
So do we want to go into the Picard death stuff, or do we want to?
Well, we should talk about when he talks to Data.
Yeah, because I think
that's what everything's leading up.
I think
that's what this story is really kind of about.
I think I would be curious. I don't know if you'd ever get a straight answer from the writer, at least not for the next 20 years. I'm really curious if this scene between Picard and Data, along with Data's death scene, were first conceived, and then the rest of this story was then built sort of backwards to lead up to it, because the both the visual and the philosophical setup is such an attractive, such an interesting idea of Picard sitting there talking to Data.
And that's how the show starts, when he's having the dream.
Yes.
He's playing cards with Data.
And the thing is that this conversation he has with Data is fully supported by Data himself in the TNG the Time Zero two-parter, the season 5 finale and season 6 premiere, if I recall correctly, where Data's head is found in and everyone's freaked out because they're like, oh my god, this means Data dies, but Data's super delighted about it, and he has this conversation with Geordi, who's all moping, and Data's explaining he says a similar message to what he says here, which is having a finite life gives value.
That's what organics do.
Exactly, and that makes you. And he says it's almost the same conversation. It's a little bit less. I mean,
he doesn't regret that he sacrificed himself because that's what organics do. They sacrifice themselves, or they. I mean, they just sometimes die, but they choose to give up their lives.
And Data had that sort of moment, Data speak moment, where he's like, the captain's like, I was mad at you for, I felt guilty. I was mad at you or whatever.
He's got all this baggage about all this Data stuff. And he gets to talk to Data.
Yeah, and Data has a moment where he goes, Captain, do you regret sacrificing your life for Soji and your people?
Right.
Then why would you imagine I regret sacrificing mine for yours?
Exactly.
And it's Data calling Picard an asshole.
Yeah, it was such a Data thing to say. Next week I'll have to find the quote from a TNG episode that's similar, where Data's like explaining some logic thing about the value of synthetic versus augmentation versus stuff like that, but it's just has the way he delivers that line is just like, but Captain, this and this, then that and that. He's like, well, fucking okay, I can't argue with that. But it's an awesome thing to say.
And an even more Data line was when he says, knowing that you loved me forms a small but statistically significant part of my memories.
Exactly.
Which was a fantastic. It was that was the most Data.
He goes. I hope that brings you some comfort. And Picard goes, it does.
It does.
Thank you, Data.
I know. He's so happy. That was like his most
I think it's the happiest you've ever seen Picard in his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He was like, you know what? Yeah. It was really good.
The butterfly that lives forever is not really a butterfly at all, which is another nice line.
Because all right, that the end part made me think of the earlier on when he's talking to the butterfly and he says, "You're lucky" or whatever. You're the lucky one.
Yeah, you're the lucky one. That's right.
But does he mean like you're the lucky one because you get to fly out of here, or you're the lucky one because you just keep existing?
Maybe both. I think.
And then Data totally mentions the butterfly.
Yeah,
it's not a real butterfly, but it doesn't die.
Am I real? And then he wakes up. But the couple things, other things about that scene. First of all, it is very clearly it's Picard's study that's been redressed into this kind of weird Beetlejuice.
It was a massively complex quantum simulation.
Exactly that.
And I have a couple questions about
like some
that,
kind of Edgar Allan Poe room.
It
with
was,
a clock
but
with no time.
It also really evoked Data's study in Oxford in All Good Things in the finale of TNG.
Yeah.
Where Data is sitting in a study and he has that streak of white hair and he's wearing that robe where later when he goes to die in this episode,
he's like some cognac.
He's wearing that robe, or a similar robe, and I thought that was another really great thing because it kind of evoking that
snifter of like cognac, and that robe, which goes into the part of being like, this sort of classic sort of human. Yeah, no, I thought that worked. That could have easily been cheesy, but I thought it really
and the
worked
music,
well.
The music for when Data's dying is they're playing that song "Blue Skies."
Oh yeah,
do you know who sings it?
I looked it up because I'm not qualified to be on this podcast, so I had to look that up because I know this. I knew this had to be an Easter egg, so I looked it up, and it turns out it's the actress that plays.
Soji, Sutra, etc. It's Isa Briones sings the song.
She's singing
Blue
this
Skies.
particular version of Blue Sky.
Yeah, she's multifaceted. Like her brief role as Sutra, I thought she did a really good. It was really dynamic. Like some of the facial expressions she sort of like made. I'm all about like these facial expressions.
I know.
But just like it showed her as being.
She could move her face around.
Yeah, she's good at it. But she's also just dynamic beyond that.
No, she was because there was
she could sing,
and there was a difference. There was a difference between. I think she was in Hamilton, not the main cast. I think she was in one.
Word.
She played somebody in Hamilton, but even the difference between Daj and Soji, there's a difference. They're twins. They believe themselves to be twins, but there still was.
There was a subtle difference.
There were some differences in the personality.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting.
So Picard says he remembers dying. Data didn't. This is where they give some timeline stuff.
Because it just sort of like because he downloaded all of his memories before he died.
Yeah, well, Data's consciousness exists in a massively complex quantum reconstruction made from a copy of the memories he downloaded into B4 just before he died.
Yes.
So he died. Some timeline stuff. He mentioned he got killed in 2039. 2379.
Yeah.
All right. So 7 years later, 2379.
2379.
7 years later, 2386. 7 years later, that's when the synths attack
It's like
Mars.
401 years after.
Yes.
I was born.
What? So no, I was saying 7 years after Data died, the synths attack, and then 14 years after that is when. So this is 20 years later. This moment is 20 years after he died. So it seems like, I mean, how old can Picard get, right? So that makes sense. It's just kind of interesting to place it off. 2385. 2385 is when the synths whatever. What it is 2385 or 86 or whatever is when synths attack. In All Good Things, Picard, when he's on his vineyard, that's actually 2395. So that all kind of fits with the timeline.
Yeah, it's a similar timeline. It's a few years off, but it
all works.
Similar line, yeah.
So it just struck me because that was less time in between when Data died and when this occurred that I gave it credit for, but it makes sense because it's like, why would it be like a million years later?
Yeah, and also the
I guess because in real life,
like with the synth attack thing, you have to remember that the of course the Maddox and AI Sung synths are their own special deal that are on the side versus the synths that were the more utilitarian. They were not Data level. They were just more robot.
Hello.
still-
Good morning,
still
plastic
faces.
people.
Good morning, plastic people. Yeah, so I mean, I think you could, there's a lot to say about this particular scene, but ultimately it's just best experienced. I don't think there's too much to discuss other than it was really well acted, really well set. And by the way, there are really this, I'm thinking of these as bookend scenes because there's the scene where Data is talking to Picard before Picard walks through, does the reverse walking into the light where he actually, instead of going to heaven, he becomes alive again.
Goes back to Earth.
Although you could argue, there's philosophical debates there.
Well, so the scene it was a simulation, right? So Data himself, he was a simulation. So
Yes.
So a simulation from what? From where were they all living in Soong's kind of like?
It's his consciousness.
It's in the computer.
It's all in the computer, but Picard's consciousness was in the computer as well.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
They were storing it there
Right.
until they could put it in the body.
Yeah, and
when he walks through, he's walking into the body.
Right, and I get that part. I just don't get why Data had to be a simulation, because Data was living in there too, because they had to kill him, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't in the robot head. He was in the computer. That Picard.
So they were
was pulling
simulating Data's body, but they were simulating Picard's. I mean,
No, they weren't simulating. Data's body was in nowhere. No, it wasn't simulated.
So this was all that we were looking at there was kind of like a simulated representation of like
A mental construct.
a mental construct analogous to a dream, but not the same as a dream.
I think that's a good way to put it.
because when Data says go, it's time for you to go. That's like, how would you time that out perfectly? In a dream, it makes sense because a dream happens in like 30 seconds, and it's like you can have those thoughts in split seconds before you wake up.
But it's also the
So that's
idea
why
of being a consciousness that is divorced from the physical reality. One assumes, maybe incorrectly, that is somehow that your perceptions that are also divorced from reality. The perceptions exist only within that sort of quantum construct. It makes sense to me that it would be more of a dreamlike thing. And
it makes more sense to me to be more of a dreamlike thing.
And that
too.
external. But what is a dream anyway? A dream is a simulation in your mind. This is just saying it's a simulation in a computer.
In a computer.
In the same way that when they put Moriarty, when they tricked him into going into that little hologram with his girlfriend so they could have adventures. So this little computer is sitting on somebody's desk simulating Moriarty and his girlfriend having adventures through the universe, and they think they're in the real universe.
So right, but due to fractal neuronic cloning, they're able to take one neuron of Data and extrapolate a whole being from him. But that's not what they were doing there.
Well, yes and no. They also, I think the idea is that they had, as Data says, they had his memories. Mm-hmm. And so they had his memories, and then his memories were one thing, and then his mind was a different thing. And that's they were able to recreate his mind with that fractal neuronal cloning. And that's why he has no memories beyond what his mind and the memories they've provided.
So the simulation was separate from like the chips they like took out and broke to kill Data.
No, I think that the simulation, those were the core bits of Data that without that Data doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Okay. And
we're talking Data with a capital D.
Capital D, baby.
Capital D.
Always. Yeah, and then just the last part of them timing, it's like, it's time for you to go now, Captain. I think it's weird to internally time that with the external. It's like, how did Data know it was time for him to go?
I mean,
I don't. That's when it seems more dreamlike, though, because in a dream you can totally pull that off in a dream.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think we have a disagreement here, but I'm not worried about that because it's it's a storytelling thing. And
I also want to say that I'm not using this to try to break down like anything.
I think you're using this to break things down.
To ruin the entire series and say you hate it.
And in fact, retroactively ruin Star Trek for me and everyone else in the universe.
In this world, if you disagree with me in one point, you're a shitty human being.
I think you're no better than those synth monsters coming through the sky.
Every other possible universe, you suck.
Oh no, there's supposed to be infinite universes.
In the mirror universe,
but
in this one.
So there's Picard talking to Data, very sweet, very touching.
I thought
closure.
I like that. That was a good scene. The second time I watched that, I was like, whoa. I was like,
and then of course we see a little of Picard waking up, and then they do the techno babble and be like, "Yeah, you got no superpowers, and you look like an old man."
Yeah, and we actually gave you the same amount of life.
There's all sorts of production reasons why we're doing this.
You got 10 years.
You got the age spots in the same spot.
Speaking of good looks, Patrick Stewart, Picard, whatever, gave a good look when he was like, I wouldn't have minded another 10, and then he like gives this little mischievous look. 20.
He's like, I'm a cheeky guy.
Yeah, it was
okay,
pretty cool.
So like I'm sure there's enough information if you really watch a lot of Star Trek, you can calculate how old Picard is at this time, but they actually come out and say that he was 94.
Yeah, and it's that tracks with when he was supposedly born.
But it's cool because I guess obviously in the future people live a couple decades.
Yeah, McCoy
longer.
was like 130.
McCoy lived a long time.
He was looking
pretty bad.
So like Picard, if you're in the future, like if you're in your 90s, it's sort of like being in your 70s.
Yeah.
Maybe.
90s is the new 70s.
Then
the 70s are like the 40s or something.
Then there's the death scene, right?
What was that line? He said, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our I didn't spell this out. I wrote lit life, and our little life is rounded with a sleep."
Yeah, that's a quote from The Tempest.
Okay, that's
from
what
Shakespeare.
I knew that was a quote from something, and those words are weird.
Star Trek will always throw a bit of Shakespeare in.
Is that the last one that Shakespeare wrote?
I believe it might be the last published.
That's like I saw that actually.
Oh yeah, no, The Tempest is a good one. It's the basis of Forbidden Planet and a lot of other stories.
Some people were trying to convince me to like read the story on Wikipedia or whatever beforehand, and I was like, no, I just want to like. Because that was one I hadn't read before.
Pro tip for everybody.
So I just went in blind, and it was so much better that way.
Pro tip for everybody out there: if you haven't been able to, if you found you haven't been able to enjoy Shakespeare or whatever, the trick with Shakespeare is you got to fucking watch it. Mm-hmm. Don't read it. Plays are not meant to be read; they're meant to be watched.
Oh yeah, don't read a play; it's horrible.
Find a copy, go get a PBS version, see a movie version. Well, you watch Forbidden Planet. It's not the same words being used, but it's the same basic story and philosophy. Watch Shakespeare. It's cool. Fantastic.
It's the equivalent of looking at a musical score instead of listening.
Exactly, and it's not. And Shakespeare is not nearly as difficult to understand as people think it is.
You just have to hear it.
You hear it, and you see the context.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's like anything. When you see it in context, a lot of the wordplay and stuff makes sense, and that's true of anything. That's true of anything.
Like in Shakespeare, when you read and someone dies and someone else goes treachery, and you read it, it's just like there's no weight to it. You're just kind of like
read it. Honestly, you can go online right now. Go look up get the best of both worlds script. Get whatever of the best Star Trek story there is, and just start reading the script. And a lot of it sounds stupid. Because it does sound stupid when it's not brought to life by the production.
A script is instructions.
Yeah,
it's instructions. It's a recipe on how to build something.
The acting, the decisions the actors make, it really has an effect, positive and negative. It can go both ways, and it can go both ways in the same production. Unfortunately, that can happen as well. But
cellular homeostasis algorithm.
But this was just a beautifully shot scene, and the decision to have Data. Two key decisions I thought were great here. Data aging, right? Which is, even though it's in a simulation, it's that is him achieving his humanity. It's not just the death, it's that he goes through this cycle of like, I'm getting old and I'm dying and then I'm disappearing. And then I think the very interesting part, and I think people are going to talk about this and interpret this for a long time, is the inclusion of TNG era Picard sitting next to him, with the younger face, the red, the original TNG uniform, because partly you say, okay, that's him in the simulation being joined by his friend. He's manifesting an image of his friend to comfort him as he passes. And it makes sense in the dream sense because Picard is on the outside in the real world. He's helping him pass. So having an avatar of him there makes sense. That's one perspective. Another perspective is that kind of like the Nexus in Generations or something, that Picard, maybe his mind has left the simulation and he's in the golem now, and now he's sort of resurrected in a sense, but maybe he did leave a piece of himself behind, a copy of himself in that simulation to die with Data. And the imagery was very, very specific. The imagery of their bodies and the room sort of evaporating and then becoming star stuff. It evokes the idea that they are not becoming nothing, that they are returning to the universe and their components are being returned to the universe.
Yeah, right. It should all that sort of nebula.
It's very metaphorical, but because obviously if we're going to be nerds and pedantic about it, no, that's just in a simulation and the power's out. And they did the 2001, killing Hal scene. I love that.
I'm gonna pull out some cards.
By the way, important. It was a minor thing, but I think it is hugely clever and hugely important and kind of interesting and weird and fucked up that they used the Hal killing idea to kill Data. Except in the Data's case, they're relieving Data of the burden of consciousness, and whereas Hal, they were doing it against Hal's will, but it's the same concept, pulling out, sliding out these little things that slide out, and one by one as you slide out, another stage in the death progresses. Pretty darn neat.
This was a proper burial for Data. I mean, Nemesis, I think on a meta level, they were just like, this did not give enough closure to who Data was, and this did a good job, I think, of really giving. I thought it was really well done, and like I said, the second time I watched it, it hit me a little harder, and I was just
it hit me hard both times.
Yeah,
I was just able to deal with it more the second time.
Yeah, and the first time it's just like, what the fuck happened? And even Picard's like, I was angry. Of course, like he was angry for a different reason, but the audience is just kind of like, what's happened? But this one, like, talking about Nemesis, but for this one, they really closed that one up well. And this whole show is, Picard letting go of a lot of
Jean-luc Picard.
This show is about Picard letting go of a lot of things, Data.
It's me, Jean-luc.
He was letting go of Data, these ideas that he has to control these things. He has to manage new things that are coming along and stop trying to hold on to old things. Like there was a lot of that sort of letting go and sort of being at peace with things that was going on there. That I thought it worked pretty well. The whole that whole mind transference thing freaks me out because was there couldn't they just? I mean, this is the question. This is nothing new question, but they transferred his brain over to a golem. Couldn't they transfer it to millions of golems and then have a million consciousnesses?
It's an old philosophical.
What is consciousness?
Right. Which one's the right one?
Yeah. Is that really him?
Does any of it even matter?
And does the one that lived with Data that you were referencing that died a little bit, was that the last bit of real Picard? And this is just some other.
It's like go watch Chris Nolan's The Prestige. That's a really good movie about magicians that with Christian Bale. And with Wolverine,
that movie is weird,
and it's a great movie. But it discusses some of these ideas in that direction. And sure, you can come up with the cool part about Star Trek. Most often come up with some in-universe explanation. In this case, it's the golem. There was only one, and Maddox was the one who's really good at this, and Girardi was able to do some existing stuff, and that's limited stuff. And now that golem's done, they can't make another one. Or you can always come up with something. But yes, the other argument is, okay, they've just invented immortality, and at some point, just everyone can just go in these things, and even though they told Picard, "Oh no, you're not immortal," we were listening, and that was cute.
But
we were all paying attention, man.
Yeah, that was a cute scene, and that did help you endear us more to AI soon.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's also you just said that, but that's give it 5 years and everyone's why you could have made him immortal.
Yeah.
Except for in the Data sense.
What if they made a million golems and it was a shared consciousness that the more consciousness you roll out,
you mean the
more
Borg?
Yeah. Oh shit.
That's
Oh,
like
fuck.
quite literally the Borg.
That's like that's Borg without the technology. Well, the technology to create the organic.
Was the dude in the last episode that was like Locutus? Was he the same guy like from a few episodes before that was like Locutus?
Oh, that guy. Locutus?
I was trying to. I think it was a different dude.
It was a guy-
I think it was a
okay.
different dude.
I thought it was a different guy, but I wasn't sure.
All right, so I think
Sorry,
that
God, I gotta stop saying that.
yeah. So but would you say so buttons?
I said so buttons again.
I
I'm
say
trying
that.
to-
I say that a lot too because you say that.
Yeah, it's not like when someone says, I do that, and you go, hi, you said do. Like, that doesn't happen much, so you can say that. But people say so a lot. And
Yeah. So is a you just did it there.
Yeah.
And the thing is you started saying so
did.
buttons, and then I started saying so buttons when you'd say so in sort of a way to mock you, I guess. But then I started meaning it.
Yeah.
And like being compelled to say it
It's
because
some kind
it's a clever little thing to say.
What
Yeah.
about when people say cool beans? What's up with that?
I don't know, man.
Amaze
That
balls.
sounds
Amaze
no,
balls.
amaze balls
Now
sounds
you're just
cool.
fucking offending me.
Yeah.
I'm
sounds great.
offended. I'm offended.
That's amaze ball.
All right, so cool. I think it was an exciting, fun story full of unexpected turns and stuff. As I said, again, next week we'll talk more in detail. We'll talk kind of about we'll look over the whole season and discuss some of those things. We also want to talk about what other people have been talking about. We'd like to hear your thoughts. So continue to write us letters and stuff about the what you thought of the season, what was good, what was bad, what you're hoping for happening next season.
Everybody use all your free time to rewatch the entire series.
You got time.
Everyone's
and in
got
fact,
time.
I was reading a fact.
You know who you
in a
are.
week.
Don't kid yourself.
I assume this is correct because people on the internet are usually right about these things. Somebody said that if you add up, like now that Picard is done, if you add up all the existing hours of Star Trek, it comes out to, I think, like 24.5 days of material, which means you don't have enough time to watch all the Star Trek before next week. But
No, but you have enough time before the pandemic subsides
exactly
to watch
precisely,
the entire.
and with breaks in between.
You might be able to watch it twice.
I don't know, man. Before Avengers, either the first or the second Endgame or whichever one, I watched the entire Marvel series starting at the beginning at Iron Man. The next one was Hulk, I think with Ed Norton. But then like I watched it all in order, and by the end I was tired, man. Like not like productive tired, but that kind of tired. Just like,
Oh
whoa.
no! I know because I did the same thing, and it is it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's a lot,
but
At
it was
least
cool. I'm glad I did it. But near the end there, I was just like,
Kawat
ooh,
Malat.
Kawat
So
Malat.
before we close up for the night, I guess first to remind everybody again, season recap discussion next week. After that, different Star Trek topics. Continue to send some in, so we get some suggestions. We'll pull those apart. We'll let you know next week what we're going to talk about. A couple weeks from now.
You won't even know what.
We'll give you homework if there's
You
any
don't even
particular
know.
We don't
episodes
even
you need
know
to
what
watch.
it'll be.
We'll give you homework and you can follow up on that. If you want to get in contact with us, it's got Star Trek at it's got Star Trek.
Twitter.
Had.
Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's got StarTrek.com. Feedback at It's Got Star Trek. A couple
Feedbag.
things before. Yeah, feedback.
Not fight. Not feedback.
I'm seriously, I'm going to have to add that in. Because
Feedback.
I'm sure somebody has already emailed
Somebody's
us there.
goofing on that one.
There,
Someone's gonna fish us. by
some
doing that.
hilarious or insightful comments.
Someone's gonna
has been
add their
sent in
own.
there.
Someone's gonna add their own and fish you.
But before we close up for the shop for tonight, I just want to double check. So, we want to talk about the hanging threads because I think it's a good thing for people to think
And the
about.
dangling participles.
And the dangling parts as we go in. We've already discussed some of them, but one of them is Girardi. Is she going to get in trouble for this or not? We don't know.
Probably not.
I think maybe she doesn't. She deserves ultimately to be absolved. But
it looks like they're just going to be a band of outlaws.
well,
like,
no, okay. So
traveling
here's
the
the thing.
galaxy.
Here's the thing that's crazy, right? So like, even though I think that Girardi has a very good argument for why she does not deserve any particular punishment for her actions because of the involvement of Starfleet and the mental incapacity related to being like effectively under the control of a Romulan double agent, you still need to have like a hearing or something to sort that shit
or at
out.
least some emotional scarring on her part.
Yeah, which there seems to be some that also was resolved fairly quickly. We'll
Yeah.
see. They have an opportunity to go somewhere with it.
I kind of wanted to see Deep Space 12, but I guess it's not that big a deal.
next time maybe.
It was a mild letdown.
We still don't really know the deal with the future synths, as we touched on briefly, but again, that's something to think about. And by the way, are they related to Control from season 2 of Discovery? I think that's something Jesse still needs to catch up on season 2 of Discovery, but there's a plot point in there that involves something that could potentially be related to this. No particular evidence, but there's some plot things that line up.
That's the next thing I'm gonna watch. Is Discovery.
I'm gonna rewatch that soon.
Discover D.
We talked about
these
what happened to
nuts.
Narek, right? What happened to Narek?
What happened to Narek?
Did he just wander off? Did he get beamed onto the Romulan forests?
Is Dodge still out there? somewhere?
Because nobody likes him anymore.
Dodge? That's another question.
He's probably looking. He probably went back to the cube and is looking for his sister.
We might be able to assume now that Dodge is dead. I still have a feeling like they could bring her back, and since she didn't go through this whole plot line, she could be like, "What the fuck? These people are assholes."
Is there anything else to explore with Rios and that Jana and the flower dude? Like that whole. What was the point of that whole thing?
Magnificent flower.
The magnificent
I think
flower.
the point.
And Rios and Jana.
We got it.
I think we got it.
I think unfortunately I agree. It would be more interesting if something. It was an odd extra connection. I think that
I don't know what it really established.
Is that the only reason why Rios is all fucked up and weird? Or is there other shit going on?
I guess that was to establish why he was fucked up and weird.
No, all his fucked up and weird shit seems to stem from that, because the order of events was he watches his captain blow 2 people's heads off.
Yeah.
He's like, "What the fuck is your problem?" Then the captain blows his own head off.
Yeah.
Then he covers up that shit according as Starfleet says, and then
he becomes like the mopiest man.
and then they kick him out of Starfleet. They put him on medical whatever because he's all like can't handle it.
I guess that was the purpose of that whole thing, and they're done with it probably. But although that magnificent flower guy, I would have liked to get.
I presume it was one of those gold painted dudes. You know,
it would have been disappointing.
He was some kind of synth pope or something. I don't know.
Narissa, is she dead? Narissa's dead, not dead. I'm guessing not dead. And it would be awesome if she was like dead. We don't see her in the 2nd season, but then she like pops up in the 3rd season. That'd be cool. Then is Suture going to stay turned off, right? Because I know Dan, you referred to her as dead before, but like, I mean, he kind of just like used a little remote control thing, but it made a weird little zappy sound.
Well, I think
so. Was it?
Did I refer to her as dead? I know that the Saga was dead.
Yeah, I think
maybe I said Suture is dead. I don't know.
Regardless, it's just is she just turned off? Like what happens with all this? Since I know they're going to set up diplomatic whatever, that'll be an interesting thing. But Picard's leaving, right? So we know that, and I know again this is where I am very respectful of when decisions have to be made. I generally am the one who says lean towards what creatively is more interesting. So it's okay to overlook a few things here or have a few things be inconsistent if the overall impact of the creative decisions is to get whatever main point across. And this was kind of a case where I think they were just like, we really need to have a scene at the end where they zoom off in the spaceship, because it's kind of like, how long have they been hanging out there? Where are they going? Like, is Picard going to hang out there and help with the diplomatic stuff like he promised he would? Or is he going back to Earth to help with that? Or are they going to stay on the ship?
Yeah, right. I mean, Soji said that she's going to do some more wandering, but who knows what happens with that. Real quick, it reminded me of when Agnes Girardi goes, "Make it so" to Picard halfway through the episode. Why did she say that? Had she heard him say that before? If she had never heard him say that, how did that fit into that scene?
I'm sure it's in books. I'm sure there's like at least 2 biographies of Picard, and there's probably like an autobiography that they don't even talk about.
It's like catchphrase, engage and make it so, and like his they learned about in college or whatever.
Like somebody was like, "Dude, you got to write an autobiography." It's like, "Oh, guess so."
And you got to say make it so in there. That's how everyone knows. It was weird that she said that. Anyway,
I agree. And then
she must have read it in a biography.
Will we see the Hollow Friends again? I'm guessing we will.
Super Hollow Friends.
So that's another thing to consider. And then also, last thing, but also very important, is 7 of 9 just abandoning all the XBs? Like, she's just like hanging out on their ship, and she's like, "Fuck it, I'm going to go out too." Like,
it looks like she's on the team now.
Yeah. Now, granted, to be fair, she was the whole Fenris Rangers. It's not like she took over the Borg cube for the purpose of helping, but like, are they good? Are they not? Like, we don't know what the deal with Narek. We don't know what the deal with the fucking Borg cube with all the XBs. So I think
She established a connection when she took control of him for a minute. That might have just been for that one special moment, but it seemed like,
so
open up to something.
one could assume maybe the Borg are in a good spot because it's synth planet, and the Borgs are kind of like in line with that, and they're also feeling shady. Maybe the synths and the Borgs.
maybe they can live together.
Are there other
Yeah.
beings on the the planet? Is it just synths?
Doesn't seems like it's only the synths.
It was one because when they
Copelia? Is that what it's called? Copelia?
So when Captain O was, or Commodore O, General O was talking about sanitizing the planet, they even said specifically they were like, they're all organized into this one
The
settlement.
planetary sanitation.
They said they're all
pattern number 5.
Yeah, Julian's in the Vite sector.
That's not how I talk.
Julian in the Vite sector. She was talking.
I don't talk like that.
No, that's how they were talking. I wasn't making fun of you. I was trying to pronounce it like they did, but I was failing. It was really myself who I was making fun of.
I'm just messing with you too.
Yeah, I'm messing with me too. No, they said specifically they were like, they're all gathered. Everything on the planet is basically gathered at this one civilization. So they implied that there's nothing else going on with that planet. I guess.
bet.
Sure, there's some wildlife.
I think there's nothing going on there.
Yeah.
Well, they had to make butterflies, so how fucked up is that?
Yeah,
Butthole
that's
flies.
right.
They got a bunch of rocks. And
Made a bunch of
shit.
butthole flies.
Butthole flies. Yeah, I think the buttholes.
I'm sure
I think
they
the
left
Borgs.
out the butthole.
I was going to
flies.
say, I think the Borg should live with the synths.
Do Borgs have buttholes?
They have.
What's the point?
They have
Do they have like little
tubes.
no, I bet they have like little weird cool little apertures that like replace the
anus.
The anus.
Yeah,
or
and they
Probably
put
some
tubes.
sort
They
of-
connect tubes
Yeah,
to it.
there's a connection point up.
Yeah.
In
and it's like a vacuum is all
there.
Yeah.
It's
I think that makes
some
the
sort
most
of-
sense.
Some sort of sucking.
Feces evacuated.
Yeah.
So lonely.
that guy should join that planet.
Whoa.
Maybe they should bring him in. Maybe the whole second season should be about them encountering the guy from the animated series.
Deep cut. Bring back that character.
Yeah.
Because I feel bad for that guy. He's still
I do
stranded
feel,
on that
it's so funny
planet.
that character's a piece of shit the whole episode of the animated series. Go listen to that episode of the podcast. It's a real fucking good podcast. I noticed some people started listening to it when we recommended that last time or 2 times ago. Recently we said go listen to the animated series episode. I forget. It's episode 8 or something of our podcast.
Yeah.
Go listen to it because that's a good podcast episode, and the animated series kind of kicks ass.
It
if
really-
you dig
it's
Star
really
Trek,
nice,
you're totally gonna dig it. Cheesy parts.
It's got the most Andorians.
Yeah, it does. Well, it's got a whole lot of. Well, Enterprise probably has more Andorians.
Oh, really? Okay.
And well, I don't know. It's a good debate.
Enterprise has a lot of
uh,
Andorians.
Enterprise does. Have
Enterprise is all about Andorians. There's a whole like fucking
But the animated series
plot line
has-
about how with Andorians, like Andorians are
It's Andorians and Vulcans are like the main deal in Enterprise for the most part.
The
Where
animated
it's like-
series has the Cation and
Zinti.
and the
the
other guy.
The Andorians are as important to Enterprise as like the Bajorans and Cardassians
Yeah.
are to DS9.
I think so. Yeah,
Right.
they're like an undercurrent for like most of that series. All right. Anyway, so that does it for tonight. We learned that Borg probably have some sort of tube aperture connections for their buttholes.
and it's probably pretty awesome.
We learned that death is not the end. That actually
If you're Jean-Luc Picard, you get to
quantum-
live a little bit longer.
the quantum simulation. And we learned a whole lot of other fun things, but we'll discuss more next week on the It's Got Star Trek podcast, where we wrap up the entire season of Star Trek Picard, season 1, and talk about what we'd like to see next time.
USS Zheng He.
And then we'll have to figure out what to do the podcast about in the future.
Oh yeah, we've already got like a boatload of ideas, so we know we're going to
There's
pick
a
one of
ton of
those, but keep
ideas.
sending them in because like we've got a
Yes.
bunch of good ones. but
Oh,
we want to like.
have people actually given us ideas?
Oh yeah, people have sent in ideas, and we've already discussed some ideas. So
We'll have to talk about this
Yeah.
off podcast.
Wacky fundamental field replicator with a neurochromatic interface.
precisely.
That's the best line of this episode.
I think so too. So I look forward to talking with you guys next week and from hearing from our audience. And this week's episode was sponsored by Johnny Notes.
Johnny Notes.
Johnny Notes.
Thanks for listening.
you
around
Totes
the
Malotes.
world.
Johnny Notes. He brings the notes.
When you don't remember how to drive your boats, just talk to Johnny Notes.
Just call
When
up
have you
Johnny
ever
Notes.
driven a
Just
boat?
talk to Johnny
Have you ever
Notes.
driven a boat?
Not on the road.
Yo, Johnny Notes.
I've driven a boat.
I don't drive boats.
I have.
Yeah, it's all fucked up because the steering's all delayed. There's so much lag.
It's really wacky.
It's like in
There are no wheels.
it's in cinema pro mode and not in game mode.
Yes.
So it's so much lag because it's trying to like process all the water.
Stay out of the ship.
Too much processing of the water.
Depends on the boat.
Yeah.
All right.
Some boats are better than others.
Good night.
Well, oh, hold on. What is Gamadan? What is the story?
It's just that. A story.
A story of the end.
Of?
Everything.
Like Ragnarok or Judgment Day. An ancient myth.
Some say it dates back from long before our ancestors first arrived on Vulcan. The story of Gamadan begins with two sisters. Twin Kalagu.
Demons.
Twin demons who come at the end of time to open the way and unleash the Chahalagoon.
Very bad demons.
One sister is called Sebnatan, the foreteller. She plays a drum made from the skin of children. She strikes it with a chain of skulls, so hard and so long that her heart bursts from the effort. The other sister is called
Sebshina? Yes, we know about her.
So you know that she carries a horn from a great pale hell beast called Gamadan. You know when she blows a blast on the horn, it will unleash all the Chahalagul who've been waiting since the beginning of time. You know the sky will crack, and through the crack in the sky, the Chahalagul will come ravening. You know about the 1,000 days of pain. You know the streets will be slick with entrails of half-devoured corpses. You know the worlds will burn, and the Chahalagul will feast and nurse their brats on blood and pick their teeth with bones.
No, we did not know any of that.